Somewhere beyond the recesses of time and space, two podcasters are set adrift in a machine, picking up transmissions of movies that are forgotten but not gone.
Okay, Truman seems to be writing me a note here. What's going on? All right, let's just read here what he says. Welcome to Movie Memory Machine, the only podcast about forgotten movies that needs bifocals to read this note. Hey, I did need bifocals to read that note. And you are on a forgotten movie podcast called Movie Memory Machine. I am your host, Landen and joined always by my co-host, Truman Caps. Truman, it's good to read a note from you.
Landen, it's great to spontaneously regain my ability to speak in time to tell you this. And I also want to say, hey, congratulations on just being open about the fact that you need to wear glasses to read the little handwritten notes that I write to you, because I know that you've been very self-conscious about that to the point of threatening to kill people if they look at you when you're wearing your glasses.
Okay, I don't understand this now, but I have to check myself at the door in that I don't need glasses.
You have to check yourself at the. Is that just the bouncer not letting you in the club at all? You
No,
have to
that's-
check your. It's not coat check.
I'm
it's Landen
self-selection, self-omitting myself. Like, I don't even need Mike Rebell. I'm just like, I don't belong in that club with this shirt on, so I'm not even gonna try.
check. Not with that self. Not with that self.
I've never understood the embarrassment about needing glasses. Maybe that's fallen off over the last couple of years. Maybe not. I don't know. But last couple of decades. Certainly when I was growing up, there was a certain amount of like quasi-shame about having to pull out your glasses to read something.
Yeah.
This wasn't... When between like Victoria era, like snooty professor, like, oh, I gotta pull out, like, they have these little valises with, you just pull your glasses, unfold them, put them on your head, and then read a note out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When do we get from that to like, I gotta slowly pull this out of my pocket and read this solemnly?
I don't know. I'm trying to think of, like, were there presidents who wore glasses but nobody knew about that? But I feel like every picture of a president I've ever seen, he's some nerdlinger motherfucker with glasses on in
maybe
them.
It started after Truman. They're like, yeah, I don't want to be seen with like Coke bottle glasses like that. I don't want to be associated with that.
Look,
you know what? Eisenhower, no glasses.
No, but as
in fact, have we had a glasses wearing president since Truman?
I'm trying to think. No, I don't think we have. Listen, if you've got the name Truman anywhere in your name, it's basically foretold that you're going to be a huge nerd, and every president has run in the opposite direction from that. That's why his popularity was so incredibly low at one point. People saw him pull out the glasses and they were like, "What are you, some kind of freak like that old West outlaw Lightning Jack who needed glasses to read?"
Oh my God.
I wanted glasses so bad when I was a kid. I wanted to have to wear glasses because I thought I thought they made people look smarter, which is an observable fact, and B, they're like such a good prop for just talking, like taking your glasses off when you're saying something very important to emphasize it.
Now listen, I realize there are lots of disadvantages to people who have to wear glasses, and I'm not trying to diminish your experience at all.
I am.
For the sheer fact of how much times I have to wipe thumbprints off of my sunglasses. I can't imagine something I need to actually get through the world, but I mean, I need sunglasses to get through the whatever.
Yeah, no, when you're cool, the sun always shines. You gotta have sunglasses.
Before I had a beard, I didn't know what... I can't think back to what I did when I was thinking. I rub my chin and the hair on my chin so much when I'm thinking and pondering now that I'm like, what the fuck did I do when I was thinking? Similarly with glasses, there is something about like taking them off while you're thinking and like chewing on the arm of it, or what do you call that?
Yeah, that's the arm, the bit that goes back behind your ear.
Yeah.
Now listen, getting us around to the topic of our movie, I recently, as in like a few hours ago, watched Crocodile Dundee, and there's a scene late in that movie where a newspaper editor walks out of his office with his glasses like fully just holding one of the arms of his glasses in his mouth, just deep in thought. Like his hands aren't full, it's just he's like got one in his mouth and they're dangling out of his mouth like he's a dog who's fetched them. And I found myself simultaneously thinking, see, this is the great thing about wearing glasses, is you can do weird shit like that and people think it's normal. And then B, I hope the backs of your ears are clean, because that is
well, it's incentive
fucking
to keep them
gross.
clean.
It's incentive to keep them clean, or it's incentive to just stop caring and embrace a nihilistic worldview.
Wow, we've alienated every glass wearer on the planet at this point.
I mean, look, we're not judging. We can't understand your world. Please write into the show and tell us what we got wrong, and please keep listening.
Okay, here's a question for you. Short of Blazing Saddles,
A movie you couldn't make today.
has there ever been a successful Western comedy? And if you say City Slickers, I'll accept that.
Okay. Well, then let's complete the transaction. City Slickers.
I want to argue City Slickers against being a Western comedy, but go ahead.
How much money did A Million Ways to Die in the West make?
I forgot that movie existed.
Well, I mean,
I am in a machine that throws forgotten movies in my face, and I still forgot that movie.
if the machine tries to make us watch that movie, I will jump into space because I don't fucking wanna. I haven't seen it, nor do I want to have to think about it.
But Charlize Theron.
Yeah, we can get Charlize Theron in other ways. There's
Reindeer Games, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. She's been in other forgotten stuff. Was she in BMX Bandits, or was that another Australian?
That was
or
Nicole
South
Kidman.
African. Yeah, okay, because she's
Okay,
South
now-
African.
Jesus Christ.
Okay.
We're getting a head start on offending Australian culture today.
All right. They're both Commonwealth nations that get a lot of sunshine, and they both have checkered pasts in terms of other stuff. But hey, you know what? We don't need to be a bummer.
But America
We're not
does
talking about
not.
Lizard. No. We're squeaky clean here, far as I can see.
So no other Western comedies come to mind?
No other. Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot we were talking about Western comedies. Well, okay. Do they have to be successful? Does Wagons East count? The movie that killed John Candy?
That does not. I mean, that's a Western comedy that exists. It's not successful.
No, it's certainly not successful.
Because I'm trying to bring this around to today's film, Lightning Jack, starring Paul Hogan. What is purportedly a Western comedy, though I struggle to call this a comedy. But it got me thinking. I'm like, well, maybe I'm being unfair. What other Western comedies are there besides Blazing Saddles? You know, the end-all be-all of Western comedy.
I mean, this isn't really an answer to your question. I would say that Silverado has more larfs in it than your garden variety Western. I get it. It's mostly straightforward, but there's I mean Kevin Costner in that movie is just doing clown shit the entire time. I think that the reason we've seen this sharp fall off in Western comedies is because there's been such a fall off in even just regular Westerns getting made that there's just less of an audience to laugh at the tropes of those movies getting mocked.
Shanghai Noon.
Oh yeah, Shanghai Noon. Yeah, okay, no,
There you go.
that totally counts. Very successful Western comedy.
Yeah, okay.
Great.
So it took me a second, but I got there.
You waited for me to go out on a limb and show my whole ass making an assumption about why they don't make Western comedies anymore, and then you give me the name of Western comedy I saw in theaters.
I hate to tell you this, Truman, but that was like 20 years ago. So your statement still holds water. They don't make Western comedies anymore.
That's impossible, Landon. I'm 23 years old. Barack Obama just got inaugurated. I'm in the prime of my life. Yeah. Well, Lightning Jack, I guess, is trying to be a comedy, isn't it? And I would say at times, at times, I sort of laughed.
That's what every comedian dreams of, is just getting sort of laughter.
Put that review above the title on the poster.
I sort of laughed.
Yeah, at times. Not I sort of laughed generally. At times I sort of laughed. There were plenty of times where I didn't laugh. Yes.
All right. Well, today the machine has made us watch Lightning Jack from 1994.
Yep.
Truman,
Yep.
Can you tell us the things that occur in this film?
I
see what I did there? Do you see what I did there?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Thank you. I have my glasses on. I can see exactly what you did there. Nearsighted Wild West outlaw Lightning Jack Kane, played by Paul Hogan, narrowly escapes from a bank robbery gone wrong in which the rest of his gang gets killed. Frustrated by poor press coverage of his exploits, Jack sets out as a solo bank robber in hopes of becoming a legendary outlaw. To escape from another botched robbery, he takes mute shopkeeper Ben Doyle, played by Cuba Gooding Jr., as a hostage. Craving adventure, Ben joins up with Lightning Jack as a partner. But before they can ride off into outlaw infamy with one big score, Lightning Jack has to teach the cowardly and inexperienced Ben how to ride, shoot, and love like a cowboy.
This is the first of many moments in this episode I'm going to struggle not to reference Orville Peck. But I'm going to resist.
Okay,
for the
well,
time being.
could you actually reference Orville Peck, because I don't know who or what that is. Educate me, Landon. I'm as naive as mute shopkeeper Ben Doyle.
All right. Well, he has a song. Orville Peck is a gay country western pop star.
Good for him.
And he has a song in collaboration with Willie Nelson. It's a fantastic fucking song.
Okay.
And it's called "Cowboys Are Frequently Secretly Fond of Each Other."
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's a good way of putting something that I assume is true.
The lyrics of the chorus go, "Cowboys are frequently secretly fond of each other.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think all them saddles and boots was about?
Well,
There's many a cowboy
riding.
who don't understand the way he feels for his brother.
That
And
seems
inside
true.
every lady, there's a cowboy who'd love to come out. And inside every cowboy, there's a lady who'd love to slip out."
Oh, okay. I mean, I agree with the sentiment of the song. I think there's a tenderfoot from the big city, a city slicker, if you will, I know what the saddle and boots are for. Like, it's to ease in the process of riding on a horse for a long time. Like, I don't think that is for. Although this movie seems to think that there is a sexual usage for them, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need Paul Hogan to teach me about sex.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's pulling out the metaphor, the kind of personification, the I don't know, evocative imagery of like you're constantly riding in emotion, and you're straddling and getting your leg over. There's leather involved and sweat, and you're doing it with other dudes.
What does that have to? Nothing is sexual about any of those things that you said. What are you talking about, dude? There's nothing about being married. There's nothing about whipping yourself afterwards, praying the entire time. What's going on?
Oh my God! All right, just to sum up what Truman had said about this cast and crew, it was written by, yes, the star Paul Hogan.
Let's be clear. It's written by Academy Award nominated screenwriter Paul Hogan.
Okay.
Show respect.
Thank you for prefacing something I want to say later. And
welcome.
Directed by Australian director Simon Wincer, starring Paul Hogan, Cuba Gooding Jr., Beverly D'Angelo, Kamala Lopez, with special appearances by Pat motherfucking Hingle, Richard Reilly, L.Q. motherfucking Jones, Roger Daltrey?
Yeah, and Roy motherfucking Brocksmith. That's right, baby. Accountant for the Hudsucker Corporation.
I think he's also in Bill and Ted's, but anyway.
And he's also in a little movie called Total Recall, where he gets shot in the face very hard.
The specs for this movie. Are you ready?
Are worn by Paul Hogan to help him read.
This movie was released on March 11th, 1994.
My dad's birthday.
Savoy. You said that last week.
I realized that as I was saying it.
Released by the studio Savoy, which this is the first and probably only Savoy film we'll do. Time to guess. How many theaters do you think it was released in?
Was this 2,400?
Less than that.
Less than that. 2,000.
A little bit less.
Ooh, I am not as good of a shot as Lightning Jack. 1,800, and that's my final offer.
That is as close as you probably can get. It's 1,710.
Okay.
Now, look, I crunched some new numbers, Truman.
Okay. Tell me about these new numbers.
Because I think this is going to give us good context, and in our season finale, I will go through the episodes we've already done and look at these numbers as well.
Landen is foreshadowing future math that he's going to do, folks. Get ready. Stay tuned.
Here's the thing. I looked up the percentage of theaters in the U.S. that this film was playing in.
Oh, you nerd. I love it.
So to give you some context, I realize this episode is released far in the future of when we record it. So think back to the summer of 2024 when Deadpool and Wolverine was in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
That showed in 75 to 80% of theaters across America.
Wow. Kind of surprised. Well, I'm just wondering what was going on with the other 20%, but that's...
I think those are like repertory theaters.
Mm-hmm.
So this movie was released in about 5 to 6% of all theaters nationwide during its opening weekend.
Wow.
I also got a little bit more information here, which is like this is that release schedule is what was considered a modest schedule compared to blockbusters, not necessarily small, but modest compared to huge films of the time.
Yeah.
Hoping that it would kind of like hit the mid-level expectations of its budget.
Yeah. So they didn't set the bar too high for themselves.
This was, and we're gonna get into the Hogan of it all in just a minute, but this was like by 94, both Crocodile Dundees and a failed Paul Hogan movie had already come out. So this was like, how many more Hogan heads do we have left in America? Let's market to them.
We were looking real hard for them. And by we, I mean Paul Hogan and a couple of his rich friends were looking real hard.
Do you want to guess what this debuted at, box office-wise?
I can't possibly guess because I know for show it was number
okay.
2. Sorry,
it's number 2.
I can't help myself sometimes. I don't watch the trailers, but other information gets in front of my eyes.
No, that's good. That's totally fine. It comes in at number 2, which is higher on the scale of our films that we've covered so far. I think second, it ties Barnyard as our highest ranked film so far.
I'll never fully understand things about what motive, like what people go to see in theaters and what numbers. I just don't. It's because this movie, I don't know. I'm surprised this is the one that got the butts in the seats.
Well, that's why I like to look at what was in the top 10 that weekend, because it gives some context over, like, what have people been watching? What else do they have to go see? Like, what's just been the movie-going culture for this last month of winter in 1994.
Yeah.
You want to hear what we got?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Okay. So coming in at number 1 is the Nicolas Cage, Shirley MacLaine film Guarding Tess.
Yes.
In its first week, so competing neck and neck with Lightning Jack.
Mm-hmm.
In its second week, the surprise hit, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Ah, boy. Yeah, we were looking for pets back then.
The number 4 movie in its first week, so surprised we're not covering this one, The Ref.
Well,
Dennis Leary.
Dennis Leary. That is not ringing any bells. Again, I was a wee lad at this point, so I don't know.
He's a burglar and breaks in on a couple that's like going through like a divorce, and then he ties them up and has to like moderate their argument while he's trying to rob them.
That is an interesting premise, and I wonder how it was executed. Interesting.
Number 5, Schindler's List in its 6th week.
Interesting.
So I think we were looking for something a little bit lighter.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say. Actually, no. At times I laughed a little during Schindler's List. There are a couple of moments of levity in that very dark film. I mean, it might have as many laughs for me as Lightning Jack did.
Lightning Jack. Oh my God. Okay, just to round out the top 10, On Deadly Ground with Steven Seagal in its 4th week comes in at number 6. The Kirk Douglas film Greedy comes in at number 7 with its 3rd week. This is a number I haven't seen before. I was surprised that this was in theaters this long. In its 12th week, at number 8, is Mrs. Doubtfire.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said it's in its 12th week. It's been in there for...
That's a 1993 film, still in the top 10 at box office 3 months into 1994.
Was Mrs. Doubtfire, in a way, kind of like a Crocodile Dundee for the 90s? I know it's not a one-to-one, but you think about Crocodile Dundee as this kind of weird and singular thing. It's just, hey, here's this guy, he's Australian, and he throws knives and is cool, and that becomes just a huge overnight, international success. Mrs. Doubtfire, hey, here's a guy dressing up as an old lady. I know that it's Robin Williams, who's already an established thing, but, like, it kind of just, everybody was primed for it and ready for it right then, and just a few years later, you look back and it's like, interesting.
No, I mean, not to completely shoot you down, but I think that's a movie where all of the stars align, because you have Chris Columbus coming off of the Home Alone films. You've got Robin Williams, after his, Academy Award nominations and going back to his zany, comedic roots. You've got, A Broken Family for the 90s, but you're still doing the heartfelt family values of the Reagan era. To me, it's just like that one was culture alchemy that brought it to fruition.
Okay, maybe what I'm trying to say here is I've watched both Crocodile Dundee and Mrs. Doubtfire recently, and I don't think either of those movies holds up amazingly well. I think Mrs. Doubtfire holds up better, but okay, no, I'll take that. I was completely full of shit, but hey, we filled up some time.
And then just to round out the top 10, 2 films that I haven't heard of. Angie in its 8th week, which is like, how can something stay in the top box office for 8 weeks? And I've never heard of it. Interesting.
Interesting.
And
Well
Sugar
Machine,
Hill.
take note.
I don't know what Sugar Hill from 1994 is, but I know what Sugar Hill from the blaxploitation 1970s is, and I would rather see that. I shouldn't say rather. I don't know what this one is, but that's in its 5th week. So,
if you haven't heard of it, it's probably not like, I don't know. I don't know that it's better than the one from the 70s.
It can't be better than the one from the 70s because it's a badass lady that is bringing a bunch of zombies to fight gang lords. So it's kung fu, it's drugs, it's action, it's everything. You want.
In that it's kind of like a Mrs. Doubtfire for its era because it's about a badass lady. All the other elements don't really line up, but because it's a movie I've heard about in the same breath as Mrs. Doubtfire, I'm connecting them.
All right, let's just finish out some of these stats here. What kind of legs did Lightning Jack have?
One of them was almost chewed off by a croc. Oh wait, different movie.
This was only in theaters for 3 weeks, which this is shocking to me. I also haven't seen this, where it's number 2 in the box office in its first week. It drops to number 5 in its second week, drops to number 9 in its third week. Why would you pull something out of theaters while it's still in the top 10?
Oh man, they like.
Unless my numbers are wrong, which I'm happy to admit might be.
I don't know. I also don't think that it's a bad choice to bet against Paul Hogan in the mid-90s. I mean, if I'm a studio executive, I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, this is not going to become a sleeper hit. Like, we know what's going on here. We've watched him try this before, and it hasn't worked, so...
You're working at Savoy. You're not working at Paramount. You could be Canon getting the Superman title and going, yeah, we're going to make a ton of money off of Superman 4. And then and having it end your company.
Okay. I mean, the way that this movie was financed was very unique, to say the least. And also it was financed in a way that gave Paul Hogan a lot of control of it. So I don't know. I'm assuming that maybe the distributors were being controlled by someone else, and that's why the thing, that's why they pulled it out of theaters. It was the one aspect of the process that Paul Hogan could not threaten with a large knife.
Maybe. All right. Well, let me give the budget and box office take, which will segue into that because I want to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This had a budget of 36 million Australian dollars, which translates to about 26 to 27 million US dollars. It makes 16.8 million domestically, is not released internationally, which if you have a major star from Australia, why are you not releasing it in Australia?
Yeah, wait, they didn't do an Australian release at all.
I mean, that would factor into the international box office numbers, and there are none. Domestic is just U.S. and Canada. That's shocking, and I don't want to call bullshit because it seems like they just wouldn't not. Like, why would they not release it in Australia? So this is the earliest film we've done so far, and I will put the caveat that the further back in time you go, the less data you have for box office and budgetary stuff. They just didn't keep those records very clean until about the mid-90s, roughly around this time. So, I mean, you can find some stuff, it's just not always super reliable. The secrets of the past, lost to the sands of time, the Library of Alexandria burns, it's these sorts of things are just tragic. Interesting. Based on this having a budget of 36 million Australian dollars, I have to imagine this is co-financed or at least entirely financed outside of the U.S. Truman, you sound like you have some info on that. Yes. In true me fashion, I went and I zeroed in on the most boring possible thing and really dove deep. More boring than reading off the entire top 10. I mean, let's find out. Listeners, write in. So this movie was financed in a very unique way where basically Paul Hogan created a company or a corporation called Lightning Ridge Limited, which was traded publicly on the Australian Stock Exchange. Oh, yeah. I read this too. Yeah. So if you invested, so it was just open for the general public in Australia to, if you wanted to back his movie, you invested in Lightning Ridge Limited, and whatever you put into the movie or into the company would go to finance the movie, and then you would get dividends from the proceeds of the movie if it was successful. This was the first time anyone had done this, and no one has ever done it again. So basically Paul Hogan did this because he went to studios in the States to try and finance the movie, but he got rebuffed because they wanted him to give them a lot of creative control. This is a quote from him in the LA Times talking about the financing. And as a gift to all of you, I'm not going to do it in an Australian accent. Thank you. Even though it's the only one you can kind of do, because all of your accents end up Australian. All of my accents end up Australian, but then my Australian accent kind of just turns into me doing an impression of Frasier's dad, which is really the only impression I can do. But he said, quote, "Yeah, Paramount said get out. They told me Lightning Jack wasn't funny. They said Coneheads, now that's funny," which seems to be him taking the piss out of Paramount because the Coneheads was a huge flop. Fair. So anyway, so he set this whole thing up so the Australian investment public, like people who were trading on the stock exchange, would finance the movie. He had to shoot the movie, even though the movie was mainly filmed in the United States for exteriors, all of the interiors were filmed in Australia, and he hired an Australian director in order to qualify for a specific Australian tax credit for Aussie films. And also that meant that the Australian investors then could get a tax credit for investing. So the main reason that they were able to raise $35 million was that Australian investors on the stock exchange were able to write off whatever they made off of this movie. So anyway, he's basically I'm going to make two contrary statements here. One, yes, it's not a super stupid idea, but two, it does also sound eerily similar to what the writer of Operation Fortune was sort of attempting to do with decentralized
decentralized autonomous organization or whatever. Well, because Paul Hogan said to the LA Times, I'm sharing this ride with about 5,800 people who believed in me. And he also said, though, this is very risky, but the best part is there's not some humorless accountant calling the shots. And then he added, I'll be terribly disappointed if this doesn't work. Tug it, caller. So all of you out there who didn't go to see Lightning Jack, I hope you're happy you hurt Paul Hogan's feelings.
You know what? Just as a note, let me just give a good day to all of our Australian listeners, as we do have quite a few in Australia listening to us. So I guess maybe we should preface this episode with an apology, like we did the loser episode.
I am now all the happier to not have done an Australian accent to be quoting Paul Hogan.
Just on this one episode, though, all of the other ones, no regrets.
Only in this case, because I don't want to disrespect your culture in a movie about one of the most famous Australians of all time. I will only do it when it's incidental to the main subject of our episode. What I like about this is this ties into a grander unified theory I have of Academy Award nominated screenwriter Paul Hogan, is that I know, Landon, that you have some thoughts about the auteur theory, but if you want an example of an auteur in the film industry, or someone who is at least trying to be, Paul Hogan kind of is going for it. This is a guy like Paul Hogan. The entire concept for Crocodile Dundee, a wildly successful movie that was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, that was Paul Hogan came up with the idea and wrote the script. Likewise here, he wrote the script for this movie, stars in the movie, and he also masterminded an entirely new form of film financing that had never existed before, specifically so he could retain maximum creative control over his vision. You gotta respect it a little bit.
I'm gonna add a twist of lemon to that, though.
Okay, sounds refreshing to me.
I'm wondering if the studios weren't kind of doing a Nathan Fielder on him, putting Paul Hogan through a rehearsal situation and letting him think he was being auteuristic. That's not the word for it, but that's the word I used. The illusion of control.
On the auteur spectrum, yeah. So, or were you are you saying that the studios were like, yeah, if you want to do a very financially risky and dubious method to pay for the movie, sure, we'll put your Paul Hogan movie in theaters for a couple weeks and then yank it the second it starts doing badly?
I'm talking all the way back to Crocodile Dundee. And I guess we're just going to start today's episode talking about Paul Hogan rather than going into this. Although we still have to circle back to where this was on your radar when it came out. But
I was a wee lad. I didn't know shit about this movie. So we're done.
Okay, I saw this in theaters.
Okay, let's come back around to that in just a second. Finish your thought.
Paul Hogan, I think in his mind, thinks he's a Stallone, thinks he's an Eastwood. But even for Crocodile Dundee, studios are like, for some fucking reason, the American public is going apeshit for this commercial actor saying, put another shrimp on the Barbie, Australian Tourism Board. He's got a script. Let's see what works. It worked for Ernest.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of Ernest parallels. And also some Mrs. Doubtfire parallels, but that's fine.
I think the studios are like, there's money here, and if he has a script and like a vision for how to bring, I don't think Crocodile Dundee is entirely, the success of that falls on his shoulders. I think there are a couple things going into it that are way outside of Paul Hogan's control that made that successful. I also just think it was a place and time. That said, sure, Lightning Jack is probably far closer to the auteur part of it, which is why it's a terrible mess.
Yes. On this we can agree. And look, I'll also grant you, there are 3 credited screenwriters on Crocodile Dundee, so clearly other people were there at work on that Academy Award nominated script.
Yeah.
But I think just also, I don't know, in how we look at Paul Hogan and how we talk about Paul Hogan, and I do want to hear your experience seeing Lightning Jack in theaters for whatever reason in just a second. I think it's worth remembering this.
Okay.
Paul Hogan was 47 when Crocodile Dundee came out. So, it could still happen for both of us, dude. We could still become international superstars.
Okay, great.
Never count yourself out. But
do I have to go to Australia to become a superstar?
I mean, well, I don't know, Landon. Are you committed?
Let me rephrase that. Do I get to go to Australia to be a superstar?
Yeah. Excuse me. Our Australian listeners are up in arms about this right now. I was trying to think of oh, they're chucking their boomerangs on the floor in protest.
Truman, why are you?
No.
Oh my God.
An interesting thing about the movie Crocodile Dundee is that there's no boomerangs in that movie at all until the very end, when Reginald Vell Johnson, playing an American, yanks a bit off of the back of his limo and uses it like a boomerang. And it's like, where did that come from?
Reginald Vell Johnson in an Academy Award nominated script.
I mean, look, that right there, all of the Academy voters in 1986 looked up from their cocaine-dusted mirrors and said, that's my pick. The other thing, but no, this Paul Hogan wrote a movie in his mid-40s in which, with the intention that I am going to play the coolest dude in the world, a living legend, a warrior poet, the toughest, most badass guy who a beautiful woman falls in love with immediately, and he wrote that. That movie made hundreds of millions of dollars. It transformed him into an international superstar and got him an Academy Award nomination. I can't imagine what that does to your brain, because he bet on himself and it completely paid off. So I don't. So I understand. It wasn't the first time
he bet on himself. He has a history of betting on himself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I know. His entire career came from him putting it all on just his innate charisma to get by, and it worked again and again. So I can't fault him for dreaming up this weird Byzantine financing method to have complete control of this movie, because it's worked every other time he tried it.
Yeah. Listen, I put this entire movie at his feet, but I don't fault his intentions. I fault his opinions. Wanting to do something for yourself, follow a dream and do anything you can to, pursue it and find some success. Sure, I can get behind that. Paul Hogan as a human being, I don't know how much I care for, but
yeah, no, I have a separate set of opinions about how Paul Hogan is and who Paul Hogan is, but in as much as I admire his moxie in getting this bad movie made. Landon, the year is 1994. The date is sometime after March 11th. You have gone to see Lightning Jack. First, why? Second, how was it?
1994 was an interesting year. I think in the past I've alluded or talked about how Jim Carrey and both in probably the year 1994 with Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, being the delineation mark from me being a kid and liking Looney Tunes and cartoon, and kid movies to I have a somewhat an immature adult cartoon character that I can now follow. So that was in the air right now, because I saw Ace Ventura in the theater as well. And so there was just a I don't know. The real reason why I saw this in the theater was just it was a comedy film that was PG-13 shown in the theater in March.
You were like, oh, it's a Western comedy. They never make these anymore. It's going to be so long until Shanghai Noon comes out.
Excuse me. Don't put your personality on my childhood.
I'm sorry I made you sound a little bit like Eugene Levy. That was not my intention.
So I don't know, we saw movies. It was not, we weren't discriminate with what was being seen, unless it was objectionable content. Like, my parents didn't take me to go see Schindler's List in the theater when I was 12, 11, 13. I don't know. I can't do math.
Yeah.
Around that time.
Yeah.
So,
Seems
Lightning
fair.
Jack was just like, okay, do my parents want to sit through the living hell that is the cartoon character of Jim Carrey? That is me assuming the thought process of parents when Jim Carrey first came out, that I know your mom still holds.
Like, yes, yeah, no, I desperately wanted to see the Ace Ventura movies when they were coming out, and my mom was just like, no, fuck you, Truman. You're not gonna, I do not like that man. I do not, you're already quoting the bits from the trailers so much, I am not going to, I can see how this is gonna go, and I'm not gonna make it happen.
And then you just put your head down and slowly walk away and just go, alrighty then.
Yes. Exactly that. I was like, well, I guess somebody stopped me. Do you remember what the atmosphere in the theater was like? Were people like hollering and throwing popcorn around when they thought that Cuba Gooding Jr. was going to suck poison out of Paul Hogan's butt cheeks?
No, because people had already seen that on the big screen a couple years earlier in City Slickers, but
oh boy, oh no.
I mean, I was probably, I don't have any memories of seeing this in the theater. It was like probably an empty theater. But the reason that this movie stuck in my head over the years, no details from it, not a single image stuck in my head. Outside
there are
of
no
that,
details.
There are no details, and we'll illustrate why this is. But this also played on HBO a lot in my youth, in my adolescence. Wow. So we saw it in the theater, and then it was like, oh yeah, that movie that we saw is on TV, and we need a break from playing Super Nintendo. So let's watch part of this movie.
I feel like there were, because I've also heard this about another movie that came out this year, The Hudsucker Proxy, which is a much better movie. So many people I know who are roughly in your age group who've been like, oh yeah, The Hudsucker Proxy, that was on HBO 24/7 for like 4 years. The era when HBO didn't have prestige TV and they were just showing movies and prize fighting was an interesting time for people's film tastes.
I kind of miss it. I mean, I'm not taking one of those stances of like, in my youth, or kids today don't know the benefits of blah blah blah.
Yeah, get fucked, House of the Dragon. We don't want your shit. We want him to just be showing, we want to show primary colors 8 times in a row.
How else are people going to discover the Andrew Dice Clay film Knuckle Dragon? What's it?
Knuckle Dragon? What the?
What's where he plays the bouncer that punches people in the head?
Yeah, Knuckle Dragon. That sounds great. I love that it can kind of be. It can be a double entendre. It can also mean knuckle dragging, like you're dumb, like a caveman. It could be.
Well, that's kind of what I meant.
Paul Hogan also, I mean, in Crocodile Dundee, his main thing is just when he has to, he just punches people in the head, and that solves problems. So maybe you're thinking of, Knuckle Dragon is a lot like Crocodile Dundee and Mrs. Doubtfire in that regard.
All right, I was going to try to look it up, and I can't. It's not Ford Fairlane. It's the one where he plays a bouncer. It doesn't matter. Anyway.
They were really trying with,
Brain Smasher.
With the Dice
Brain
Man,
Smasher, A Love Story with Terry Hatcher is what I was saying. But,
of course.
Crocodile Dundee being another one that was on HBO a lot, and I saw Crocodile Dundee so much in my youth.
I had seen bits and pieces of Crocodile Dundee on basic cable throughout my youth. Never the full movie front to back until last night when I watched it in preparation for this. My big takeaway, and I'm not proud of this, is that up until basically last night, I assumed that Dundee was a suffix like monger. Like, basically I thought Crocodile Dundee was his title. Like, you can be like an Iron Dundee or a Cheese Dundee, like an ironmonger or a cheesemonger. Like, a Dundee was just an Australian expression for a person who had extensive dealings with a certain thing, to wit,
so you
crocodiles.
Just thought he was a crocodile connoisseur?
Just like a croc. He was a croc specialist. I mean, which isn't like... He is a croc specialist in the movie. He knows a lot about them.
Yeah. But his name is Mick Dundee. For
Yes,
people who
as
haven't seen the movie, his name is Mick Dundee, nicknamed Crocodile.
Yes. And when so I don't know. That was so the first plot twist for me in Crocodile Dundee. That talk about a movie starting on page 1. That's why it got the Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay.
Just read it and weep, M. Night. We got a twist in the title.
Yeah, the only trap is the one that he sets for the crocodile that he kills. But we're not talking about Crocodile Dundee. We are talking about Lightning Jack, which is basically a remake of the first half of Crocodile Dundee.
Let's get into talking about Lightning Jack. What little there is to talk about this, because there's a lot of people I want to discuss throughout this, including the director Simon Wincer. But where do we start with this?
I don't know.
Yep, a deflated sigh is the perfect place to start.
Folks, ladies and gentlemen, there's not a lot of movie in this movie. It's amazing. Paul Hogan went to such great lengths to finance this movie and retain complete creative control, and the movie he made is one of the most just kind of half-assed nothings that we have seen on a podcast. I mean,
I would say to Paul Hogan, this is his vision. He's sorry, am I recracking that already too early?
No, I'm just like, it's sure. I mean, fair for an audience of one. Yes, I'm sure this movie meant a lot to Paul Hogan, and indeed, I think its greatest weakness is Paul Hogan was calling all the shots. But it's basically, this is a movie. Okay, this is a movie that is centered around one character who is almost interesting. Who has the potential to be very interesting.
I just right this second realized what this movie's trying to do.
What's he trying to do?
And it's failing so hard. It is trying so hard to create the myth of Lightning Jack.
Well, that is like what the movie is about. Like, that is the text of the film. So yes, Landon, good work. Thank you for making it to class today. Maybe 50 minutes late.
It's hot as fuck in my studio right now. But, I mean, like, I think in its structure of, like, a myth isn't made through a single incident. It's made through, like, backstory and multiple moments throughout a person's life. I think, like, the structure of it is trying to mimic what, like, if you go and read Greek mythology, there's not like one story of Odysseus. There's not one, from birth to death of, these characters. It's all these little tiny vignettes that make up, the myths. And I think maybe this film is going, well, let's just look at some of these ingredients that make up a myth, and by the end of it, we'll have a myth.
That is such a charitable interpretation of this film that you deserve a tax credit from the government of Australia.
Thank you. That's what I was aiming for.
I mean, yes. So, okay, because that's a fair point. This is about trying to build the legend of Lightning Jack. Lightning Jack wants to be a legend. Like, Lightning Jack is this Old West outlaw. We first meet him. He is going on a bank robbery with the rest of his gang. He's a crack shot. But in the aftermath of this bank robbery where a whole posse shows up and guns down the rest of the gang and Lightning Jack narrowly escapes, afterwards, Lightning Jack, like, finds a newspaper in like, the next town over, and he holds up a dude at gunpoint and forces the guy to read the newspaper article about the robbery to him. And he is really upset by the coverage because his role in the bank robbery is downplayed. They call him English instead of Australian. And he's, like, one of his big motivators is that he's very self-conscious. He's very image conscious about how he's being reported on in the media. He's very insecure about his potentially waning fame, which, I mean, it in a lot of ways feels very autobiographical for where Paul Hogan was at going from the 1980s into the 1990s. So, like, that, like, so he's, like, myth making is something that occupies a lot of his headspace, and that's cool. That's an interesting setup. And then the movie just, okay, that's a thing, and we've set that up, and now let's just have some kind of random jokes in the wilderness.
So I watched this twice, and both times, as I said, you heard it here on the podcast when I realized, both times watching the scene, this is where it should explicitly state or it doesn't have to be expository in terms of his words, but I need to know in this moment his goal of this film is to become a legend.
Yes.
And it just comes off as him being vain and a little stupid and insecure about not being able to read without his glasses. What? Okay.
No, you're just shining a light on another thing. Look, folks, when this movie kicked off, I say this a lot, and I want people to take from this that I come into every one of these damn movies with an open mind. I want to like every one of these. And for the first 15 to 20 minutes of this movie, I was, dare I say it, hooting and hollering, because I thought we were setting up some really interesting stuff. I thought when he holds the guy up at gunpoint and makes him read the newspaper article about himself, it's like, oh shit, Lightning Jack can't read. And then he partners up with Cuba Gooding Jr., who's mute and can only communicate by writing notes. And I'm like, wait, so the guy who can't read and is super insecure about that is hanging out with a guy who can only communicate by writing. That's amazing. Academy Award nominated screenwriter Paul Hogan, you're a genius.
I got really excited about that too, because I thought, it worked so well in Hear No Evil, See No Evil with Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
That I thought this would be a great way to play with that. Put it in the Old West where it makes a little more sense, and there's a lot of hijinks that can come from that. But it's here's a kind of premise, and then we're just gonna slide this really mundane thing in between you and what could have been fun.
It's because we get to a certain point where he's absconded with Ben, and they've escaped from the posse with some help from Ben, and then Ben writes something and offers it up to Lightning Jack, and I'm like, oh boy, premise of the movie gonna kick off. And then Lightning Jack forces him to turn around and just pulls out a pair of eyeglasses and very discreetly looks through them and threatens Ben, and if he don't you dare turn around or I'll shoot you. Sorry, Australia. Don't you dare turn around or I'll shoot you. Sorry, Australians, I apologize. But as soon as he pulls out the glasses and is able to read perfectly, it's like, movie, come on, that's not nearly as good. You walked right up to the edge of something really great.
Said nah, I don't want to do that.
No.
Oh boy. So, okay, we've. I know we're not going to go chronologically through this because it's impossible to do so. But just before we get away from the newspaper scene, there are a couple moments, and I was with you where I'm like, oh, maybe I've forgotten that this is a secret gem of a movie.
Yeah.
Because the opening when the bank heist goes tits up, there's
very Australian.
You've got Simon Wincer as a director, who we'll get into in a minute, but has some chops, and I felt very nostalgic for classic Hollywood stunts, people falling off of horses. I cannot watch when horses fall. That just is not. I have to blind. It's one of the only. I will watch a drill go through someone's head. I will blind my eyes if a horse is falling in a Western fight.
Landon, I hate to tell you this. This is going to make you so upset. In an interview with Terry Gross, when asked what things he finds offensive and objectionable in movies, director Quentin Tarantino said the same thing. So you have something in common with him.
You evoke the QT on this episode, especially when we were talking about the auteur theory. How dare you? And you know that I can't respond to you in this forum. Oh my God, we are fighting for the rest of this episode.
We're fighting. The girls are fighting, everybody.
I'm gonna draw a line in the sand. We're gonna walk away from it, turn and shoot.
Something that would make sense to be in this movie and is not. Go on.
Okay. So that made me kind of nostalgic. I missed seeing that because we get a few Hollywood stunt show sort of moments where
we do, don't we?
Lightning Jack gets shot at and he mimics he falls off his horse, but like he's just holding on to the side of it, and then once he's out of range, he gets back up on the saddle and rides off. I'm like, whoo-wee, wow, I miss that sort of thing.
You're waving your hat around in the air.
Yeehaw!
I was having a similar kind of hell yeah, movies are cool moment in these bits, because also there's a lot of nostalgia kind of just ambiently throughout the movie, because these Western towns are just recognizable from like every Western movie and Deadwood and like I don't know. So many times I was like, is that the bar from Silverado?
I mean, the thing too is part of the difficulty in filming this was that there were other legendary Westerns being shot at the same time. Like Tombstone was being shot like just over the hill.
Yeah. I love the just as there we have a housing crisis in America, at that time we also had a housing crisis for movie cowboys. There were not enough buildings for all of them to be in and ride horses past.
Okay, well, getting back to the newspaper scene, so I was already kind of like in good spirits when we got to the scene, and you set up the premise, oh, he can't read, like, okay, I'm getting kind of on board with this. And once we realize he's kind of a dummy, I'm like, oh, this could be a really fun character.
Yeah.
Once he's like, he pulls the newspaper out of the old guy's hands, and he gets kind of upset about it. He throws it on the ground and just shoots the newspaper.
So good, so good.
That was a funny little moment.
Yes.
And then it's followed again even by another little moment that I'm like, if this continues throughout the whole film, this could be pretty funny.
Yeah.
He shoots the newspaper, and then a bunch of people, like it's New York 1968, just start yelling out their windows like, keep it down out there! What's with all the racket?
They start throwing garbage at him like in Spider-Man. You mess
Trying
with
to
one
sleep.
of us.
You know what time it is? Go fuck yourself.
I completely agree. The movie starts off by establishing, hey, Lightning Jack has boundless self-confidence, and he is actually really shitty at being a cowboy. He has all of these Native American trinkets that are clearly junk that he brags about how much he spent on them, and it's just clear, like, you got ripped off by everybody. He goes in, there's one scene where they're gonna like do some horse trading, and he's bragging about how he's gonna get the horse for $5, and we just cut to the next scene of him riding the horse and going like, $30, that guy was a bandit. And it's like, sorry, $30, that guy was a bandit. But like, if I do a really heavy American accent, it balances it.
I was gonna say, you're like overemphasizing your American accent, and as an American, I'm getting kind of offended.
Listen, if you're an equal opportunity offender, suddenly you can get away with everything, apparently. But he's complaining about how he spent, you know, he got worked over on buying this horse, and there's a scene later where he's robbing a bank solo where he like sucks at it. He's very just incompetent and didn't do his homework. That seems really cool, and the movie doesn't run with that, and it absolutely should have.
Well, okay, let's dig in deeper here, because this is an interesting thing about the Paul Hogan persona, the character, where, like, is he I know he's the writer, he wrote it for himself, this wouldn't exist without him, but is he the right person to pull this off? And let's go back to the trinkets, the superstitious thing, to kind of examine this a little bit. Because the movie doesn't. Yes, they're clearly he got taken. You know, someone got $5 off him to say that he won't get bitten by snakes by giving him this arm patch or whatever, and he believes it.
I mean, he says that it's like $50. The trinket, which at 1800s prices, that's like a year's salary. He's getting very badly ripped off. But there's like something missing to the mix here, where there's still a sort of like pride in Paul Hogan that doesn't allow for the lampooning of it. Yes.
Like,
yes.
And I don't know if that's in his performance or if it's just in the movie making, because this was, as much as I love Simon Wincer, and I'm going to get into that in a bit, this was his first comedy. And I'm wondering if it just wasn't like in his forte to be able to balance and surround jokes outside of what was written on the page.
I really am hesitant to put that on anyone but Paul Hogan. Just like
Well,
only...
I mean, you don't have to convince me hard of that.
I mean, just in that he sets up this kind of interesting idea of this cowboy being incompetent, but then really doesn't want to follow through on it because it's just the only thing he knows, and the only thing that has worked for him is being the coolest, most knowledgeable guy in every scene. I mean, that's what Croc Dundee is. Also, when he first got his start on Australian TV, stop me if I'm veering too far afield.
No. Well, let's pepper Hogan facts throughout this whole episode, so I don't have to go into a deep dive on his career.
General Hogan Pepper facts of the Civil War. In 1971, he was a construction worker, and there was an Australian TV variety show that was sort of like American Idol, where normal people would sign up, they would go perform in front of judges, and if they were good, they'd move on, and if they were bad, the judges would mock them. And Paul Hogan, observing this, basically signed up as, I'm a tap dancing knife thrower act, and people, like, they put him on the show because it's like, well, this will either be spectacular or we can make fun of it. And then he went out and he just roasted the judges for like 5 minutes. He just took shots at the judges and made fun of them, and then did like a half-assed little soft shoe and threw some knives at the ground like it wasn't even anything.
He had them in his hand like a bundle of knives and just tossed them to the side.
Yes. And it's like, it's just him getting the drop on them. It's like him seeming like, oh, this guy's going to be an idiot, but actually he's got a lot more going for him than you'd think. And that was such a big hit with audiences that they had him back on the show a bunch of times, and eventually just gave him his own variety show, which ran for like 10 years.
Yeah.
But so that's the thing. Like, him being, oh, you think I'm just a working class fool, but I'm actually smarter than everybody else, is his... That's his stock and trade. That's his bread and Marmite, if you will. So when you get to something like Lightning Jack, he's constitutionally incapable of actually being an idiot on screen.
But yeah, however, it's written like that's how he's performing it. But it's the character's written kind of the inverse, and he's not playing it that way, and therefore it just doesn't work. Yeah, because he's going in and bugling the heists or the bank robberies, but there's no like oops moment for him. He's just like kind of moves from moment to moment where it's like, open the safe. I can't. Only the manager can. Well, where's the manager? And the guy points to the ground to the one man that he just knocked out with the butt of his gun. Nice. And he's just like, there's not. I'm hesitant to only identify like Will Ferrell as the fool, the overconfident fool type of character, but like there's Paul Hogan plays it like, oh, I didn't fuck up, but I also like don't know what I'm doing. It's a weird middle ground that just doesn't work. And it's funny because the movie hints at a greater depth that he is very self-conscious and very insecure, but that he covers it with this outward bravado and everything. But then there's never any hint, though, as the movie goes on. There's the other people around him are never saying like, yo, you fucked up, what's going on? Like, there's never really consequences for it, and any scene like this bank robbery where he fucks everything up is immediately followed by a scene where it's him and Cuba Gooding Jr. and him being like wise and Cuba Gooding Jr. being an idiot, and him teaching Cuba Gooding Jr. important stuff with no scene-to-scene continuity of like, wait, but you clearly also don't know what you're doing. Sorry, I just had a personal revelation while you were talking. Because going back to why I saw this in the theater. Because what you just said kind of put me in mind of when it does work. And you know who it works with, as much as, again, another person, I have different opinions about their personal persona and their on-screen persona. It works with Mel Gibson. Another Australian actor. And why I saw this in the theater is I underestimate how much I liked the movie Maverick when it came out in the early 90s. Which I was probably like, oh, this is another Western comedy. I also saw Wagons East in the theater. So, like...
Okay, that's a John Candy movie. It makes sense that you saw that in theater. Yeah. That is,
But I saw a lot of Western comedies in the theater. But anyway, this is much closer to the release of Maverick, and I probably would have been like, oh yeah, I'm totally down for more of that.
Yeah.
Being at an age where I'm not able to discern quality.
Of course. I would say, I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen Maverick, but I feel like that movie is a better movie than this movie.
Yeah, I watched it a couple years ago. It holds up. I mean, it's not unscathed. It's a little long, a little convoluted. There's some tiny problematic stuff with it, but like, could you picture Mel Gibson 1994 era in this role?
I mean, yeah, I could picture him doing really well with it. I mean, it would be hard for me to picture. It's hard for me to picture it only because of all the stuff I know about how this movie is just the brainchild of Paul Hogan.
Yeah, fair point. Okay.
Do you think, also, just speaking of cowboys at that point in time, do you think that Lightning Jack came to the United States as part of a cowboy exchange program with Quigley Down Under? Like, we sent Tom Selleck to Australia and they sent Lightning Jack here?
Quigley Down Under, directed by Simon Wincer.
What? Wow, he really. I did not realize that was a Wincer joint. He was really making a go of it with the westerns.
Listen. Okay, let's talk. Yeah.
What was he like? Lightning Jack didn't work. Crikey, what do I do? Here's what I'll do. My problem was that I put one Australian in America. What I need is one American in Australia. That's the key.
I think Quigley came out before this movie. So maybe he was trying to repeat the success in reverse, but
let me swap everything except for one element. Very bankable star of the 1990s, Paul Hogan. People will flock to theaters for Hogan.
Yeah, Quigley was in 1990, and in fact, this film marked his steep fall off from being a really huge budding Hollywood director. So I'm gonna start talking about Simon Wincer in the middle of his career and kind of go back and forth. Ooh. Right before this film, he directed the smash hit Free Willy.
Wow.
I cannot overstate how much of a cultural impact that had in 1993.
You know, in that way, Free Willy is really a lot like Crocodile Dundee and Mrs. Doubtfire. 3 movies that are basically the same thing.
Jesus Christ. So, like, he was rocking hard around this time, and then like right from Free Willy into this, and then he kind of gets another chance with Operation Dumbo Drop right after this movie, which also tanked, and then he got one last chance because he's a man in 1996 with The Phantom, and that tanked. And we really haven't seen him much since then. He did reunite with Paul Hogan in 2001 for Crocodile Dundee in L.A.
Yeah, and I think that revitalized his career because that movie made like $3 billion at the box office and got nominated
made
for
like $3 is in the box office.
Wait, I'm seeing it was nominated for both Best Original Screenplay and Best Adapted Screenplay in the same year. How is that even possible? They say, this is the thing. The Academy loves a movie about LA. They always go gaga for that.
Well, I just want to finish on Simon Wincer real quick. You were talking about Simon Wincer as a Western director, and like that's a legit thing. He made a huge mark on the Western front. That didn't even make sense.
It got a quiet response.
He directed all episodes of the miniseries Lonesome Dove, which kind of revitalized the Westerns in the 80s.
Sam Waterston in that?
Is he in that? The main guys are Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall.
It seems like it's illegal to make a thing that doesn't have Sam Elliott in it, but I was wrong. He's not in it.
Sam Elliott or Sam Waterston?
I don't know. Some guy named Sam who plays cowboys. Folks, it's kind of hot where I'm recording too, much like it is on the prairie where Lightning Jack rides. Go on.
All right. So Simon Wincer, the director of this movie, has a stated place in Western history. So it kind of makes sense for him to step into this film. He did, as you said, Quigley Down Under in 1990. He is an Australian director, kind of went back and forth between Australia and the U.S. For instance, he makes 2 horror films in Australia in 1979 and 1980 called Snapshot and Harlequin, respectively. But he makes his big American debut with another film that was indelible to my youth on home video, which is Daryl, Daryl, starring the kid from The Neverending Story.
Let's be clear. It's like the word spelled out like it's an acronym with a period after each letter.
Yes. Yeah, and that's why I said D-A-R. Oh, okay, got it.
It seemed like you were just spelling it as though the audience needed to know specifically how Daryl was spelled.
I was pausing, looking at the periods, which is what you do when you read, not when you are supposed to read periods. So next time I write notes, I'm going to write say period.
This is a beautiful look inside the process, a peek behind the curtain of how the podcast gets made.
Okay, last movie I want to mention for Simon Wincer, because it also applies to today's film, is he did one of the most overlooked and enjoyable buddy movies of the 1980s. Well, it's kind of late.
Yeah.
It's in the era. It's 1991. It's like the last 1980s movie made, but it was in 1991, which is Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Harley Davidson and Marlboro Man?
When you texted me last night that you'd watched that movie, I was like, is this a patented Landon Solano bit? Why are there 2 different brand names in the title of this movie? Is this just one big commercial?
It is a wild, interesting film that shouldn't exist, but it does. And Don Johnson and Mickey Rourke, both not wanting to be in the film, and somehow their devil-may-care attitude contributes to it. I don't know. It's a fun action. It's set in 2016.
Oh, hello. Suddenly interested. I didn't realize this is people in the early 90s thinking about what the 2010s would be like.
Which is, very, like not thinking. It's like 25 years ahead. Like, if we made a movie set in 2050, so, like, nothing really looks that different. If you didn't know it was set in the future, you would be like, huh, well, 1991 looked a little strange.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the cast list and character names on Wikipedia, and
Please.
One of the female leads is named Officer Virginia Slim, and it's just dawning on me what kind of like it's the title is not being
Jose
euphemistic.
Cuervo's
It seems
in
like
it
the
as
characters. Yeah, and Jack Daniels. Yeah, so they were literally just naming characters in it after cigarettes and liquor. And
yeah.
Also, I'm seeing Mickey Rourke and Tom Sizemore on the same set. That must have been a fun and cool experience for everybody. I'm sure the vibes were great.
Anyway, I would rather talk about Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man than Lightning Jack, but considering
and Daniel Baldwin is in it. Wow, more
yes.
great vibes. I guess he's no Stephen Baldwin, but still.
Point being, that movie has a look at the buddy dynamics of a film that he should be able to bring to Lightning Jack, and like the buddy comedy here, like feels like they're from different movies. It just there's none of the fun and charisma that comes from the back and forth play between. I think a key component to having a buddy film is you have to have some sort of like resistance or conflict between the two. Like, they respect each other, but they have different means of getting stuff done.
Yeah.
And this is Lightning Jack knows how to do things, though he doesn't. And Cuba Gooding Jr. just is so eager to be in his gang for some reason that I don't understand.
This is just a thankless role for Cuba Gooding Jr. I feel I can see how, as an actor signing on for it, it's like, this would be an interesting challenge. I can't use my voice. I have to convey all of this with my face. But what it practically comes out to is pretty rough. I mean, it's I mean, look, and I'll say this one time, and I don't want to dwell on it or be a bummer, because Lord knows we can do that. But this movie is basically a black man who's in a subordinate position to a white man, and the black guy is depicted as cowardly and incompetent while constantly doing exaggerated pratfalls and facial expressions, and it just kind of plays into some really gross tropes, and you don't have to talk about them and single out every one. It sucks.
I'm glad you mentioned it, and I'll wrap it up by saying, yes, those things exist in this movie, and yet this movie, to mostly its deficit, but in a few very small moments, its credit, has no interest, even a little bit, in discussing race. I mean, it is
cool.
not mentioned at all in this film.
Great.
But
great.
But when you do have those tropes, it makes it a little harder to go, cool, good job there, guy.
Yeah, like I can't really give them too many points for like not dipping their toe into overt racist stuff when they then just engage with a lot, like incorporate a lot of basically subtly racist tropes into the way that the movie works. But that's whatever. We're not, this isn't social justice warrior memory machine, or is it?
Not this week, I guess.
The thing about Ben in this movie, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, is that it's like he's set up at the start to be smart. Like he is an intelligent character who is like doesn't take
smart. Any shit.
Yeah, exactly. He's, writing messages to someone who's talking down to him at the store where he works, being like, I'm just mute, not stupid. And
then later, to the owner of that store, when he's chastising him for like alienating that customer, the QB writes asshole on the thing, like the guy was an asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's sticking up for himself.
And it's like there's again potential for this thing where it's like Paul Hogan is, acting like he's hot shit, but is really a moron, and Cuba Gooding Jr. can see that he's a moron and is infuriated by his bullshit, but is stuck with this guy, and, these two guys, they're clashing, but they also both need each other for different reasons, and they both wind up learning from each other and kind of growing, and, there's room for, a kind of sweet movie about male friendship there, and the movie does not give it to us and instead wanders into just all of these other stupid slapstick scenes.
Picture this, if you will. I realize this is inextricable from Paul Hogan, but you get Mel Gibson as the Lightning Jack character, the overconfident buffoon, and you get someone who is known for their fast wit and silver tongue. You cast Eddie Murphy as Ben, who can't talk.
Oh man. Get me a cigarette hand rolled by Mick Dundee himself. That is a movie. What a picture.
In 1994, I mean, lots of egos on that set, but I mean, that would I think that, to me, in my brain, that highlights the what the good polar extreme of these characters should be. And what we end up getting is just characters acquiescing to each other and I don't know.
Yeah.
There's no conflict in this film.
There is sort of conflict. There is the conflict of Ben screwing something up and Paul Hogan having to go and fix it. And it's basically like, how will Paul Hogan... well, let's see. They are being chased by a bunch of Native Americans, and Paul Hogan tells Ben to oh, yes... ride side saddle or something, and he does a cool horse riding trick, and Ben tries it and immediately falls off his horse, and then Paul Hogan has to go back and get him.
Kind of funny, but yeah,
brutal. It's an out of nowhere brutal pratfall on the level of Jason Biggs falling down the stairs in Loser, where it's just like, oh god, I felt that. I'm worried about you right now. I don't know. There's that. There's they do the bank robbery together. And Ben, it's like he's told Ben, all you have to do is just pull out your gun and look mean. Oh, and if anybody moves, you shoot him. And then they go in there, and Ben just freezes up. He's too scared and trembling to even draw his gun, and they just have to, because he won't do anything, Paul Hogan has to take him back out. Paul Hogan's mad. And
now that you're saying it, it would make much more comedic sense, just on a foundational level, to have the Ben character be good at these things, but
Yes.
but held back by his inability to speak. Whereas,
Yes.
yeah, you're right. Whereas, like, I'm not interested in a buffoon who doesn't know how to do stuff teach another person who's much more capable how to do the things incorrectly.
Like, there's this, like, before they the bank robbery that goes wrong that results in Ben being taken as a hostage, you know, Paul Hogan is trying to rob this bank solo after his gang has been wiped out, and, like, he goes in there and is, like, holding people up, but people keep walking into the bank, and like distracting him, and he has to put more and more people over into the corner because he's not covering the door. And he asks, like, why is everyone coming in here? And the bank manager says, oh, well, it's 4:00. All the shopkeepers close up at 4:00 to come here and deposit their money. And it's like, okay, so Paul Hogan, you've screwed up at a fairly basic part of bank robbery, which is observing your surroundings. I then don't understand why 10, 15 minutes later, we're like, why do we trust, like, how do you have any leg to stand on to be mad at Ben for fucking up the bank robbery?
Right. And that scene is, like, a good example, too, of, like, a great premise for a comedic scene.
Yes,
but then
exactly.
Paul Hogan, like, doesn't play the panic. He doesn't play, he's just, like, he's a cool cucumber through it all. An idiot, but, you know, kind of just doesn't lose his cool even a little bit and gets through the scene fine. You know, like, he ends up only stealing $5 unknowingly, but, like, where's the joke? Like, we're supposed to laugh at the fact that he only stole $5 rather than the actual situation that we're in. Like, we should be laughing, like, every time a new person comes in. It's like, his reaction to that should elevate and escalate the scene and the comedy of it. And it's just like, oh, here come more people, and he's just like, okay, get over there, and he doesn't do anything.
He gets like I think the scene of more people coming into the bank is one of the better moments in the movie, because he is getting at least, like, mildly annoyed and a little bit flustered each time there's more people. It's like, oh my god, what's this now? Like,
yeah, but it doesn't throw him off his game.
No, and it does, and it should, but it's like that is the most he ever sweats in the movie, and it sucks. I think that every actor wants to play the guy who's the coolest dude in the world, who's always in control, and that, again, that branding works for Crocodile Dundee, but it's like, here, no, I want you to be, I like, it's funny when we're watching this guy losing his mind and having this crisis and not knowing what to do, but we're deprived of it.
He never loses his mind. Yeah. In fact,
no.
At the risk of seeming like we're going all over the place, I wanna examine another quote unquote joke later on to see, like, if this gives us some more insight into where Paul Hogan is approaching comedy.
Mm-hmm.
We go a little bit later in the movie, about 2/3 of the way in. They go into this town, or no, it's about halfway, because they're about to go meet Beverly D'Angelo, who's in this movie.
Yes.
And they're going to go into the saloon where there are sex workers, and Cuba Gooding Jr.
Oh, yeah.
I can never say his name. Cuba Gooding Jr. Gets nervous because he's a virgin and has never had sex before. And so
we're talking about it. Yep.
They go down this little alleyway, and Paul Hogan starts to explain how, you know, the rhythm of it and
the rhythm of the night. He
asks, you know, does your pecker work? Also, can we bring back the word pecker? He also calls someone a peckerhead in this, and, like, when did we stop saying peckerhead? I want to start bringing peckerhead back.
Listeners down under, write in and let us know. Did you guys just keep saying pecker this whole time? Because, you know, you were truly the keepers of the culture at that point, if you have.
Okay, the joke is that Cuba Gooding Jr. is terrified of having sex. And Lightning Jack says, I was only scared once in my life, and that was when I was about to have sex for the first time. Granted, I was 11 years old, ... The scene goes on.
Yeah.
That's the joke. What part of this is the joke? I want to pull this apart for a little bit. It might seem like a futile exercise, but, like, where am I supposed to laugh at this?
I think that it's the part of it is the myth making and legend building of the character, where you're like, where you separate from everything that we as individuals think about how 11-year-olds shouldn't be having sex. Put that aside. Within the framework that Paul Hogan and masculinity at that point in time lived in, what a badass. This guy got laid when he was 11, but it is such a, like, he is so cool that he doesn't even realize that that's a cool thing, and that's why he just tosses it off as an offhanded detail. So the joke is basically oh man, this dude's even more of a baller than I thought.
So, okay, I had a theory about this joke of something that this film maybe set out to do and doesn't do, but there are traces of it, which is Lightning Jack is a pathological liar on the pursuit of making his myth, which would make this joke make more sense.
Awesome, yes.
But there's been no, because of Paul Hogan's approach to, like, playing everything with pride and coolness, you never at any point think he's lying, or at least he believes everything he's saying, and thus the audience not giving any cues that we might have an unreliable narrator, just take him at his word. So when we hear him say, I was scared once and it was when I was about to have sex at 11 years old, you think, oh, what you just explained. Isn't it such a funny thing that he's such a he doesn't realize how badass he is that he had sex at 11 years old. That's not a value I purport, but etc.
No, I think it's pretty clear we don't. I think that his many trinkets are sort of I think they're also a part of that, because he has, throughout the movie, it's a thing. It's like, this is an eagle eye pendant that makes me a good shot, and this thing keeps me from getting bit by snakes, and this thing means that every Comanche in the territory is gonna treat me like family, and this only cost me $75.
He puts one on Ben's neck at one point that's a fertility necklace, and it's made of testicles, and that's another point where I'm like, what is the joke here? Are we supposed to just laugh at the simple premise of, oh my god, he just put testicles around Cuba Gooding Jr.'s neck, or are we supposed to laugh at the folly of him believing this will work?
I think we're supposed to laugh at the exaggerated expression of shock and disgust on Cuba Gooding Jr.'s face when he learns that the necklace are testicles. No, it's not funny. At times I almost laughed. This is not one of the times I almost laughed.
Okay, all right.
But so these trinkets are a thing, and it's like, I feel like the implication is, they're worthless junk. He got ripped off again and again. What a doofus. But then he says that despite his failing eyesight, he is a dead-eye perfect shot, he says, because of the eagle eye pendant. And it's like, well, he is a dead-eye perfect shot despite supposedly having poor eyesight. So it's like, wait, that again undercuts the thing. Like,
right.
Do the trinkets work or not?
And also, being a crack shot and being a fast shot are two different things. So, like, even his name doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. There's, for a guy named Lightning Jack, there's not a lot of gunfighting in this movie. I mean, there's some, but you'd think that he'd be, like, dueling people a lot because he's like lightning.
Okay, this brings up another thing I wanted to ask you, get your perspective on in this movie, because it's going to be real easy to lose this thread, which is the beginning heist takes place in a town that shoots the gang that Paul Hogan was part of, called the Younger Gang.
Yeah.
They kill the younger brothers. Lightning Jack gets away. He's riding solo and starting his own gang from here on out. But there's this lingering, we let one get away, and therefore we have unfinished business with Lightning Jack. That comes back into play in literally the last 10 minutes of this movie, and we haven't seen it since the opening. So I didn't want to lose that thread, because that is the only real through-line conflict we have in this movie. My question to you, though, is how do you feel about Pat motherfucking Hingle as the Marshal? Is he doing a good job? Who's the villain of this movie?
I mean, I think I think that it's supposed to be Pat Hingle. Although Pat Hingle, honestly, like, never really does anything villainous. He just, like, wants to shoot the bad guys who are robbing the bank, which is, like, kind of the whole point of, like, I don't know. Generally, you have to kind of work hard to get me to side with the police, but in this case, it's like, well, yeah, they don't have FDIC yet. That money's not insured. He's literally taking the money of all the people who work in the town.
Yeah.
What I like about the bad guys in this movie, what little we get of them, is that, you know, the sheriff and the mayor of the town, you know, they're talking at one point, and the way that the gang, that Paul Hogan's gang initially gets gunned down, is that basically everybody in town, all the shopkeepers, like through the Chamber of Commerce or something, have all been deputized and all have guns. So if word gets out that the bank is being robbed, the street's empty, and all the shopkeepers go up on their roofs with rifles and just massacre whoever has robbed the bank.
Yeah.
An armed society is a polite society. I don't necessarily agree, but in this case it seems to work. Good guys with guns, bad guys with guns. But then later, you know, after Lightning Jack gets away and is robbing more banks and there are more newspaper articles about it, we get this scene, basically the only other scene with the sheriff and the mayor outside of the two robberies at the beginning and the end, where they are looking at the article and the mayor is going like, hey, we got elected as like law and order candidates. Like, they make a point after the bad guys get gunned down, both at the beginning and later in the movie, of, like, having the local newspaper come and take a picture of the two of them standing there with the bodies, and it's part of this big campaign of theirs, like, hey, this is what happens if you try to rob a bank in this town. And then they're saying, shit, this looks bad if Lightning Jack got away, and now there's all these articles about Lightning Jack robbing other banks. It's gonna give him this outlaw narrative. It makes us look bad. We need to hire some mercenaries to go track down Lightning Jack and kill him so this doesn't get out of control. I like the fact that, much like Lightning Jack is trying to control his own narrative, the antagonists are also publicity conscious and trying to advance a competing narrative. I like that it's about information warfare in the 1800s.
Well, this is not The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, I'll tell you that.
Because it's Lightning Jack.
You just highlighted a major question I had about this movie.
Yeah.
That I think you might have, like, given the answer.
Oh,
so
okay.
There is a point in this movie where I'm like, there's nothing happening. Yeah. I can get up and go to the bathroom and come back and not press pause.
Dude, the machine gives us these movies. You got to take them seriously, man.
I do. I've watched this movie 2 times. So,
is that counting the time you saw it in theaters in the 90s?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I went to the bathroom. I couldn't have been gone more than 2 minutes. I mean, it was a short pee. And I came back.
I'm sorry. You go after me for accents that I do, and then you're describing how long you're peeing for.
I just said it was short. I didn't describe it. I'm not going to. I'm not going to describe it. I got tempted. You saw it in my eyes, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, the podcast where one of the hosts is tempted to describe his urination habits. Continue, please.
The point is, I was gone no more than 2 minutes, and I was listening the entire time, and I came back, and fucking Roger Daltrey was on screen, and I got so fucking confused. I'm like, why the fuck is Roger Daltrey in this movie? Why is it? I've never, outside of his own, like, Who movies, I've never seen him in an acting part. Why is he in Lightning Jack of all fucking films? And even beyond the Roger Daltrey of it all, who the fuck is this character? But I think you answered it for me. Is he one of the hitmen that the town hires to find him?
Well, now, look, I know that Roger Daltrey's in the movie, and I know that he's from The Who. I don't know specifically what he looks like, so I didn't recognize him when he's on screen. Was he one of the dudes who's menacing the ladies at the brothel? Is that who you're talking about?
No. He, I mean, you could just look him up online, but
wow, kind of passive aggressive. Why don't you
explain?
Well, it's gonna, like, I'm gonna look it up. No, I look it up and it's like, oh, Roger Daltrey played John. Oh, okay, John, great. I know who
but
John
look at his
is.
Face. You don't recognize his face from the movie?
Okay, all right,
he's
the guy with John written on his forehead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was gone, so it's hard for me to give a lot of context for the scene, but, like,
blind leading the blind.
Here's the context I can give you. There's a moment after Ben has sex for the first time. He meets Lightning Jack in the bar the next morning for, you know, a morning whiskey, as you do.
Yeah,
and as Ben is trying to mimic, you know, getting down, he's doing the thrusting movements with his hands.
It's great watching this on the Zoom right now, folks.
He elbows a surly guy next to him who wants to, like, start a fight. Like, he's 1 second from taking him out in the streets and having a duel, which we don't get.
No.
But Lightning Jack's approach to the situation is just, you know, keep a steady hand and I'll take care of this. And, you know, he whispers that to Ben, and then he looks at the guy who's about to start a fight and goes, I don't want any part of this. I'm stepping away. And, you know, takes a few steps back and goes into this whole thing about, you know who that is? That's Comanche Doyle? Is that?
Comanche Doyle. Yeah, that's what he says his nickname is. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he's like brings up this whole myth of like he shot down 100 guys, or, you know, I don't know exactly what he says, but
that is the guy he's telling this to. That guy, the guy who wants to start the fight, is Roger Daltrey.
Well, he's not telling it to that guy. He's telling it to these other guys in the bar.
Oh.
Like, I got $100 on this guy because, you know, he shot down 100 guys in this other town, and, like, you don't want to fuck with him. And what his methodology here is, I'm gonna make the guy who wants to start a fight so afraid of Ben that he backs down.
Yes, it's basically the beginning of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, except it's not good.
Exactly. This movie just takes wholesale scenes from every other Western you've ever seen and does them not as well. They try this bit again later in the movie, and when they try it, it's not with a guy who's going to back down. It's with Roger Daltrey, this badass guy who has a posse of his own, who is like gonna actually fight and shoot this guy dead. And Paul Hogan, what he attempts to do, he recognizes that the charade isn't working.
Right.
So what he does is he leaves, and in, you know, total logical fashion, sends his horse into the bar to eat
fucking stupid.
To eat a cigar, and then Paul Hogan jumps through a window and shoots the posse dead, and we're good.
Okay, so
sorry, I got lost in my own word salad there. Like, am I making sense? I don't think so, but that's not on me. That's fucking what the movie does.
Does Roger Daltrey play the horse then? Like, who?
He plays
who is Daltrey?
The leader of this posse.
Okay, the leader of the rival posse. Okay, I don't think those are the mercenaries who the mayor has sent out after them. I think those are just other dudes they bump into.
I forgot that's where we started that. Oh my god.
Yeah, no.
Okay, well,
it's been. Hey, look, we went on Walkabout with that one, but we learned a lot about ourselves and the environment in the process. That scene is absolutely ludicrous. It's just Paul, like they're gonna shoot Cuba Gooding Jr. Paul Hogan is like, okay, well, I can't help you. Bye, friend. And he walks out, and he's about to die. And then a horse just walks into the bar, and this is so distracting to them, Paul Hogan's horse walking in, that Cuba Gooding Jr. is able to escape.
He's
Paul
able to escape because Paul Hogan jumps through the window and shoots everybody.
Why did the horse have to walk into the bar?
Why the horse? Why the window? Why not just go, okay, I'm out of here, I'm going to leave, walk through the doors, get your gun, and then just walk back through the doors and shoot everyone? Why do you have to go through the horse? Why do you have to go through the window? Doesn't make any sense.
A set of circumstances that could only spring forth from the fertile creative mind of an Academy Award-nominated screenwriter. Getting back, I think we sort of glossed over the fact that a chunk of this movie, 10 minutes, maybe more of this movie, is Paul Hogan teaching Cuba Gooding Jr. how to have sex. And then Cuba Gooding Jr., then we follow him and kind of watch him starting to implement what he's learned. They go into the brothel, and Paul, this is where Paul Hogan meets Lana, his longtime lady friend, who's a sex worker at the brothel, played by Beverly D'Angelo, and he sets Ben up with Pilar, who's another one of the girls there, and she takes him upstairs, and they're up there, and she's like, oh, I've been with you all night, but you haven't said a word. What's going on? And one thing leads to another, and he basically is able to convey to her that he can't speak. and she goes like, "You can't talk, so that means you can never tell anybody about what we do." And he kind of nods with his face, this rictus of great excitement, and she goes to the cupboard and opens the cupboard, and it's full of like sexy little outfits and like a saddle with stirrups on it and stuff, and she turns
are you
to him
starting to
and
see the
grins.
metaphor now?
Yes, yeah. Now it makes sense. I was googling some sex ed films on my other monitor while you were talking.
Right.
I didn't hear a word you said about Roger Daltrey. But
No,
so
I
she
meant about
comes out
Orville
with,
Peck and his song with Willie Nelson.
you know, Roger Daltrey and Orville Peck should have done a collaboration
Ooh.
about cowboys.
Interesting.
But yeah, so just this whole scene where it's like, and then, you know, we end the scene with this look on his face of like, oh my god. So the logic being that, okay, this woman who's a professional sex worker has a lot of sex stuff she wants to do, but is not doing because she's afraid that word will get out that she's having sex, even though her job is to have sex. She lives in a building where men come to have sex, not judging it, just saying.
That's a read on it. Maybe those are her desires, and she doesn't ever get to fulfill them because she's always at the whims of the men who come in there.
I mean, okay, fair, and I mean, good for you, girl. I hope she had a good time. It seems like she did. But then also, just like, what's funny about this? Like, it's so kind of like, look, Paul Hogan created a corporation on the Australian Stock Exchange and raised $35 million from the Australian investing public so that he could specifically put this on screen. So this scene would not be cut.
Correct.
Like later in Paul Hogan's life, in like starting in the early 2000s, he got into a 15-year-long legal battle with the Australian government. They basically were alleging that he had avoided taxes on about $150 million in film earnings. Like, just basically, he was playing fast and loose with taxes. And there was this back and forth of the Australians suing him suing them. It seems fairly likely that his legally dubious scheme of creating a corporation publicly traded to fund his movie shot in America and take advantage of Australian tax credits, it seems like that came back to bite him. I'm just saying, he went to all of this work and trouble to get financing and total control for this movie. This is what mattered to him. It was really important to have a scene where he is teaching Cuba Gooding Jr. how to hump, and then where Cuba Gooding Jr. is implied to get into some real kinky fetish sex with a sex worker.
Yeah. The second you start bringing investors into it, they stifle comedy, man. You need unfiltered, just raw dog comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that's the thing.
This is it.
The investors got involved with Ghostbusters, and that's why the ghost blowjob scene is only 3 seconds of that movie. If Dan Aykroyd had created a company to fund Ghostbusters, the movie would have been 15 minutes longer, and we would have learned a lot more about what went on.
You know, something else about the tone of this movie that I want to really give people what it feels like. The structure of this is there is some sort of scene premise, like we talked about the bank heist scene where the town keep entering in because it's the close of business hours.
Yeah.
Or even the sex scene if you want to go there.
Yeah.
The pattern of this film is you get a scene like that, whether it's action filled or not, and then it's followed immediately by, let's stop our horses, get off, and talk for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Or by a few seconds, I mean about 3 minutes. Oh. And this kind of weird back and forth just kind of gave me like Peanuts energy to a degree.
like Charlie Brown and Snoopy Peanuts.
Yeah, just like things are happening, and then there's just time to stop and reflect and talk for a second about what happened and what we're gonna do about it, or just the existence of things, and then go back right to it.
Yeah, I wish that Lightning Jack had been kind of talking more about how sad he is deeply and how he feels like, being an outlaw has been
Yeah.
over commercialized now. See, I was so excited at initially at like, oh, you know, Ben is mute, Ben can't talk. This is going to provide for a lot of interesting scenes between the two of them. And then my hopes sank basically when we got further into the movie and I realized, oh, okay, so what this really is Paul Hogan didn't write a mute character into this as his co-star to set up an interesting dynamic between the characters, but he wrote a mute character into it so there could be a starring vehicle for himself where he is the only person talking in most of the scenes. So like what a lot of these scenes are, it's just like there is some cowboy stuff and then it's just basically a monologue by Paul Hogan with some pantomime reactions from Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yes, and Beverly D'Angelo. Let's talk a little bit about her. I mean, we haven't talked at all about her involvement or through line through this film. She plays an entertainer, I would call her. We don't actually see her do any sex work at the saloon. She sings.
Yeah.
She coordinates. Maybe she's a madam. We don't know. It's not explicit. But essentially, her and Lightning Jack have a history, and he's always promised to take her away from this life. Like, they're going to get on a horse and ride and, you know, to a better life. And he keeps putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and she keeps holding that over his head. And with her, it's the only time in this film when we really see him for the liar he is. Yeah.
Well, like he's been saying for 9 years, any day now I'm going to take you away from this.
There's that, which just makes him sound like a deadbeat. But like also, she comes to there's a moment after he leaves the saloon and, you know, does this kind of goodbye, I'll come back for you. They go off to do more of their bank heisty adventures.
Their bank heisties.
And when the police, the Marshal posse, come into town, the hitmen, or whatever term you want to apply to them, come to the saloon looking for Jack. She sneaks out in the middle of the night and goes to warn Jack.
Yeah.
My question is, like, how far did she travel? It seemed like they were on the road for days.
It's spatially very difficult to know in this movie, like, because all the towns look alike, and in many cases they seem to be using different parts of the same movie set Western towns to double as other towns.
It's very confusing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know how far she travels, but she travels in the night to go warn Jack. And in another instance of, like, getting his, like, tall tales, she wakes him up in the middle of the night, and he gets scared and jumps out of bed, and he's, you know, just wearing long johns, and she goes, I thought you said you slept in the nude. And he's like, I do, but it wouldn't be becoming, you know, in the room with another man. So, like, that's an instance of, like, where they could have leaned more into that as the, like, he wants to make a myth for himself and just doesn't, but he's and gets called out on it, but it doesn't. The movie never really calls him out on it enough.
It would be such a cool thing if he is really down bad for this girl and wants her to think that he's cool, and she is like, yeah, this is a job for me, and oh yeah, really, you oh that's sweet, Lightning Jack, that's cool that you think that. I would love that if he's basically getting friend zoned by her and he's trying to front for her.
I forget Mel Gibson. I just pictured this movie in a completely different tone. Let's do the Lightning Jack remake starring Michael Cera.
Oh. Yes, Michael Cera, and then who is Ben?
Who's a fast? Maybe the guy who played John Ralphio on Parks and Rec.
Oh yeah, Ben Schwartz. Yes, I could see that going really well. Yeah, that'd be fun. I'd take that. I'd take a lot of other combinations of this movie. This is the thing about Beverly D'Angelo.
Lightning Jack
in this movie.
Is a simp, though. Yeah.
Right. Yes. No. Yeah. Lightning Jack is a. Like, the reason that he's doing all of this, even the reason that he wants to be known in the papers as an outlaw, is just because he has a huge crush on this woman who does not like him. That would deflate him so well. It would be so, and then it's like, and then the moral is, but look, you have this good friendship with this guy. That's what really matters. This movie. But what I like about Beverly D'Angelo Like, I think she's probably the best performance in this movie. I think she's, she brings a lot of just sass and character to this thinly written role that she has.
Yeah.
And so, and when she's on screen, I'm really enjoying it, but I found myself thinking, like, well, wait, are you really, like, is it that Beverly D'Angelo is doing a really great job with this, or is it just kind of a relief to have someone other than Paul Hogan talking? Like, because...
Well, yeah, that's a great point.
Because you get...
I mean, is that why I had such a breath of fresh air every time it cut to Pat Hingle and the mayor?
I think so. I mean... This is the thing about Paul Hogan, is that his bit that he does, for me at least, gets old pretty quick. Like, I had to watch Crocodile Dundee in 2 parts because, like, he gets to New York in the movie like 45 minutes in, like halfway through, and I'm kind of like, okay, I can see what the next 45 minutes is going to be. I gotta just get me in the morning with fresh eyes, like, because it's the same bit, and that's So to like suddenly like, oh, hey, Beverly D'Angelo is someone who is also like competent and kind of knows what she's doing in this scene and is ordering other people around, and it's cool to see that happening with someone who's not doing a very old shtick.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. She really made zero impression on me, and that's not to take away from her. It's just the character is written as a bunch of cliches, and she's part Mae West, part Marlena Dietrich, part whatever other Western lady trope you want to provide that only exists to serve the main protagonist. Like, she doesn't. I mean, she's strong-willed, I suppose, to a degree, but she doesn't exist outside of the bounds of Lightning Jack. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's a bad movie, Landon. Like, I mean,
yeah, well, no. I'm not. I'm not saying anything but that. I'm just saying, there's no knock against Beverly D'Angelo, which she is a fine actress, and she's married to Al Pacino.
Oh, that I did not know that. Who-ah, indeed. Can we talk for a second about Ben's cool gun?
Which one?
The cool one, Landon, that he is given
the shotgun?
Late in the second act. Yeah, the sawed-off shotgun with a holster, like the pistol-sized sawed-off shotgun.
You're talking about the gun that he's given after Lightning Jack tries to teach him how to shoot for literally 2 seconds and says you can't shoot?
Yeah, exactly. That's the gun that I mean.
Let me give you a gun that lets you shoot?
Yeah. So there is, again, a fair amount of screen time. They're at their hideout. He's been trying to teach him how to shoot, but he's not very good at it. So it's like, okay, how about this? Sawed-off shotgun with a holster, very, you can, like, it basically fits in the palm of your hand, and they go through an extended sequence of like, okay, walk up close to this barrel we're using for target practice and shoot it, and the barrel explodes when he shoots it. And it's like, okay, now shoot at the side of that barn over there from a greater distance, and he shoots at it, and it's just a couple holes because it's a shotgun, it's scatter shot, and he explains the gun's only good up close, and far away it'll just, piss people off if you shoot at them. And I'm like, okay, well, I imagine the finale of this movie will involve this gun being fired in a dramatic way.
Or a comedic way.
Well, we get neither. Like, what winds up happening, it's, there's one big score. We're going to go back to the town where we robbed the bank at the beginning, and there's
Which
a big...
I don't understand.
I don't really either, but there's a big cattle auction in town that day, so there's going to be a lot of money at the bank, and this will be their one last job so they can move to New York with his lady friend. And they go, but then they realize this other rival gang is in town and is going to rob the bank at the same time.
Last minute... script conveniences.
Really just Academy Award winning screenwriter, Academy Award nominated screenwriter Paul Hogan, slips this in the last 15 minutes of the movie that, there's a rival gang and they're gonna rob the bank. But they instead tip off the town-wide posse about the other bank robbers, so the posse shoots all of them, and then while the town is busy taking a photograph of the dead robbers, they are able to sneak in and rob the bank and get away with it. But, so, like, in the aftermath of, like, they've killed all the robbers, all the townsfolk and the posse are shooting their guns in the air, and Ben is standing there and wanting to get in on the fun. He pulls his shotgun out, tries to shoot it in the air, it doesn't go off, and then as he's lowering it, he fires it in the general vicinity of this crowd of cowboys at a distance, and one of the buckshot pellets hits a guy in the butt, and he's like, what the hell? And Ben points to this other cowboy and runs off, and the injured cowboy goes and fights that cowboy. And it's just a one-off bit. And then literally one scene later, a guy goes into the bank, and both Ben and Paul Hogan are inside the bank, hiding, waiting for him.
I was so confused by this. I was like, how the fuck did he get in the bank so quick? So he's got a mask on, he's crouching down, he's in position, and he literally just walked off frame.
It breaks the spatial logic of the end of the movie for him to do this. And it's not funny, and it doesn't really do anything. And really, it also breaks any character development for Ben, because this is the finale of the movie. He's still an idiot who can't do anything right. He has learned nothing. He is still an incompetent. So they introduce it's the worst version of Chekhov's gun. They introduce a gun, and it is fired in the third act, but it's fired for no reason, and the firing of the gun makes the rest of the ending make no sense.
Chekhov's gun, with the use of it in that direction, more like I want to check out gun. I want to... Give me a second. Let me workshop that a little longer.
Yeah, let's just do it live.
Chekhov's gun, more like want to check out a different comedy bit than that.
Okay, let's... how about this? The best way to stop a bad guy with a Chekhov's gun is a good guy with a Chekhov's gun. Alternately, Chekhov's gun control, they should have just not put it in the movie. There should be like a 3-day waiting limit to put a Chekhov's gun in your movie. I like that I'm pivoting from Landon's word salad into a bunch of jokes about gun control policy. Neither of these is what people want to hear.
All right, let's go here. This movie made me realize something that we've kind of been tracking throughout the season, something that's a little surprising to me. And it started in our Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre episode.
Oh.
I didn't realize how much of a trope this was. It's so ubiquitous. And maybe you can shed some light on this, because I feel like it's a screenwriting thing. Like, how many conveniences can you get away with before the audience starts to squint their eyes at you? Which is, in the Operation Fortune episode, you really took that to task very memorably for...
Everyone's talking about it.
All of the bad guys just letting Orson Fortune get away with everything.
Yes.
Right? So, and that's come up a couple other times in a couple other movies we've covered. I think Reminiscence was one of them.
Yeah.
Because, they were all in the army together, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Like, that was a plot convenience. We have one here after he kills Roger Daltrey with a horse surprise. Again, I'm pretty sure this makes sense. And it's not just me. He ends up getting arrested. Mm-hmm. Lightning Jack gets arrested, and he's put in jail. And in one of the tropiest tropes of any movie where a character, especially in a Western, goes to jail, turns out, after the deputy leaves, guess what? The outlaw actually knows the sheriff. They have a history together. They're friends. Can you believe it? Legendary character actor L.Q. Jones plays the sheriff of this small town, and he's got Sam Elliott vibes if you don't know who he is. But
I felt that. This was above ground swimming pool Sam Elliott in this moment for me.
I would argue that Sam Elliott is above ground swimming pool L.Q. Jones. He's got a longer history.
Wow. Shots fired at 10 paces.
So there is the trope of they're secretly friends, but like this is the point of the film where the screenplay just conveniently lets the main character out of the predicament they're in.
Okay, well, I mean, I was thinking it was going to. My Orson Fortune alarm was going off because I'm like, at first it's like, Paul Hogan has been arrested. Now, finally, Ben can show that he has skills and competence and will break him out. But then it's like, he's just friends with the sheriff. Okay, so the sheriff's gonna let him go. But then the sheriff is like, but I can't let you go because, that would get too much heat on me. So the sheriff just leaves it in control of the idiot deputy. So it actually
says that he put an APB out or whatever the old Western version of that is, but left Jack's name out of it. So just the description, so that he could make his escape should he be able to.
That doesn't feel like too much of a convenience to me. I guess also just after having watched so many other movies
is coming up.
Yeah. Okay. So then take us through. Then what is the convenience that really?
Okay. Here's how the rest of the scene plays out. The deputy is too smart for Jack. Again, I think Jack is the villain of this movie, and everyone around him is like the one trying to keep society stitched together.
I don't disagree with you. Although I'm sorry. Also, neither of us possesses the outlaw spirit. Neither of us is going to be. Neither one of us is going to be Lightning Jack. We're going to be Roy Brocksmith, the nerdish toady type guy who's a shopkeeper in town, going like, "Oh, if those bandits come back, concern it!" Like we're not riding the range, dude.
Brooks and Dunn told me I should have been a cowboy.
And someone else told me that I should save a horse and ride a cowboy.
Ooh, hey. The rest of the scene goes, the deputy is like, "You're not too smart for me. Put your hand out. I'm going to handcuff you to this fucking jail cell door because I'm not going to lose sleep over scum like you." And I'm like, good for you, deputy. You're being played like you're a villain, but this is actually kind of a smart move.
Yeah, this is just good police work.
He handcuffs him to the door and tries to fall asleep. Cuba Gooding Jr. Now, this moment isn't 100% played for incompetence. It is incompetent, but it's like, I don't know. This movie just does not know how to set tone very well. What he decides to do is break into a general store, get some kerosene, pour it around the store or around the jail, light it on fire, and burn the place down to get Paul Hogan out.
This is D&D party logic right here. It's like you failed all of your speech and diplomacy checks to try and get into the jail, and it's like, fuck, what do we do? I don't know, burn it down. Like
Set it on fire.
Yeah. But this is a very chaotic good solution.
And we're not done yet. His plan is, I'm gonna set it on fire, and I'm gonna hide in the horse's water trough.
Yep.
For when the deputy runs out, and I'm gonna knock him out because he won't see me in the horse's water trough. And because I'm soaked, I'm gonna walk into the burning building and shoot or take this pickaxe and pickaxe the cell door off the wall so that Paul Hogan can walk free. But when he sees that Paul Hogan is handcuffed, he just pickaxes the handcuffs instead, and then they walk out.
And mind you, like, Ben has wrapped himself up in blankets which he has tied with ropes onto him, so they will be fully absorbed with water and will provide an extra layer of fireproofness. It is remarkably convenient that all of that works.
I'm just curious about the walking into fire while damp, if that is something that I want Mythbusters to do an episode on that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that would work.
Maybe for like 5 seconds.
This so much like, again, Operation Fortune, where by Guy Ritchie's own admission, they were kind of just writing that movie as they made it and just coming up with it on the day. It really feels like Paul Hogan just was like, oh, crikey, I need an ending for this movie. I need a way to get him out of the jail cell. And it's not even like, this isn't even like a budget saving contrivance because it's very expensive to light a building on fire and have an actor,
even if it's on the studio lot.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to do that. And also, like, the studio lot, like, their Western buildings were at a premium at this point. There were so many other Westerns shooting, and they're like, we want to burn one of them down. We have so much Australian money to spend.
So, okay, but the Orson Fortune Ruse de Guerre convenience that happens here is when they escape, LQ Jones runs out and he sees them riding off, and he has his gun pointed and he's ready to shoot, and then he just kind of pulls it back and gives a little grin and goes, I'm gonna shoot my old buddy. He got away. Good for him. I mean, he doesn't say that, but that's what his
you can hear him thinking that. Yeah. look, man, normally I want to go along with you and support you, but they, like, it, in Operation Fortune, it's like, these guys are like, they hate Orson Fortune. They're being paid to kill Orson Fortune, and they're just sitting and letting Orson Fortune shoot them. In this case, it's been established this dude has a history with Lightning Jack, and it's like, well, I tried my best. My jail's burning down. No one is like, it'd be one thing if I just let you walk away, but like, I have a very valid excuse for why you're not in the jail cell anymore. I'm not gonna like do extra credit and shoot my buddy in the back as he rides away. Like, I don't know.
You're saying that he did the screenwriting homework to make it justified.
I'm saying that Academy Award nominated screenwriter Paul Hogan knew what he was doing in this scene. He understood the assignment. Now, again, it is completely ridiculous that the solution to the guy locked in a jail cell problem is set the jail on fire, and that works.
All right. I mean, he's going into the general store to get anything in the general store that can break someone out of jail, and he chooses kerosene to burn the place down.
It seems like the worst of all the things you could get in the general store. I don't know. I feel like there was an episode. I remember this from when I was a kid and I would watch the A-Team. There was one episode where like the bad guys have a construction site and the A-Team gets caught trying to like break in and do A-Team stuff. And they lock the A-Team in some supply room to, as like a makeshift prison cell. And the A-Team turns around and the room is just full of like blowtorches and hammers and scrap metal and construction equipment that they immediately use to build like a million weapons and break out. And it's like this, like, he's presented with the same opportunity and he chooses the weirdest solution to it. I guess I'm saying the A-Team could have done a better job of saving Lightning Jack.
Well, I never had any doubt about that.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I'm stating the obvious here. Australian listeners, if you don't know what the A-Team is, it was an awesome American TV show from around the same time your favorite son, Paul Hogan, was getting famous here. Look it up.
They weren't in the dark. They had American TV.
Excuse me, there's a movie called Crocodile Dundee, which suggests that people in Australia don't even know how an escalator works. So I
want to know how Australians view Paul Hogan. Is he a hometown hero, or is he a laughingstock that's like, is he the Lando Calrissian, to me, equivalent to Australia, where I'm like, that fucking guy, if Lando Calrissian didn't exist, I wouldn't have people coming up to me going, shrimp on the Barbie, and you call that a knife, this is a knife. Like,
yeah.
Do they view him as like, fuck that guy, or are they like, fuck yeah, Paul Hogan?
From what I've been reading, it seems like in the wake of Crocodile Dundee was one of the top grossing Australian movies of all time. So by and large, people seem to be like, in Australia, it was like Australians went to see that movie in record numbers. Also, there were some people in Australian culture saying, this guy makes us look bad. What are you doing? This is not a good representation of us. He makes us look like anti-intellectual dingoes. But I think it seems like a 70-30 split, basically. And the fact that he has continued to have like TV retrospectives and specials in Australia up until the past few years.
What direction does that 70-30 split go?
It seems like 70% is like, hell yeah, that guy's awesome, and 30% is like, you're making us look bad.
Okay.
All
right.
I don't know. They keep he keeps having specials and stuff, and I mean, and the Australian government ultimately didn't charge him with massive tax evasion, so he must have some friends there.
Do we have an American equivalent of like an actor who, in 2024 or in the last 10 years, has done retrospectives of their own work in a special?
I'm trying to think. I mean,
outside of the Oscars, which is just one big, circle jerk.
Yeah, the Oscars, one of which Paul Hogan was nominated for. Did you hear? I can't think of one off the. I mean, like, who like hosts a retrospective, just looking back at, hey, remember how awesome I was? I mean,
because you got to be kind of hokey to do that.
Yeah,
you have to lack a certain self-awareness, but also like still have a fair amount of success in order to even justify having the special in the first place. Which also shocking. Paul Hogan, I mean, I'm not counting his like TV show, which he's credited as Self, he only has 14 credits.
It's kind of amazing how few movies internationally known movie star Paul Hogan has been in.
And of those, it's like 4 movies.
Yeah.
That had any kind of cultural impact.
Yeah.
And I'm including Lightning Jack in that, and that's saying a lot.
Well, it had cultural impact, and it's had a big impact on our lives. I mean, look at us here talking about it. Yeah, most of Paul Hogan's fame really comes from, like, 1986 or before. Like, he was famous in Australia and England and South Africa before that because he did cigarette commercials and beer commercials, in which I watched an 8-minute supercut of all of his, or a bunch of his beer commercials, and boy, that was exhausting, because he is basically doing Crocodile Dundee and all of those too. It's just the same premise of just like, I'm at a fancy English art party or wine tasting event, and look at these buffoons. I'm drinking a Foster's Lager, and it's good.
I was just gonna ask, did he do the Foster's ads?
Yeah, no. Before it was Australian for beer, it was just literally an Australian guy walking around England, kind of taking light jabs at English culture and talking about how great Foster's is.
Of course, you call that a beer,
but he never
call that a knife. Why did I never put that together?
But he never does. You call that a beer? That was all before Croc Dundee. And it would make sense because also Foster's, they sold beer in gigantic keg-sized cans. It would make sense for someone to be drinking a small beer, and he goes, "That's not a beer. This is a beer." I
feel like I'm experiencing a Mandela effect in real time right now.
A Hogandela effect.
That never happened.
Not to the best of my knowledge. I mean, it seems, look, maybe it happened after the fact in the 90s once he was already big for Crocodile Dundee. Like, it would be leaving money on the table for both the beer company and Paul Hogan to not do that.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look this up, and I'll address it in our mini episode as to whether or not I'm misremembering Foster's ads from the 90s of him saying that's a beer, or you call that a beer.
Also in the 90s, he was in a bunch of Subaru Outback commercials simply because the Subaru Outback was like a new thing, and he had to, and it had the word Outback in it. So it's him, I think, as Crocodile Dundee with the hat and everything, driving the car around with a beautiful lady, explaining how good the car is, and they're being chased by some Aussie thugs. And that was my first exposure to Paul Hogan, like asking my parents as a kid, like, why am I supposed to care that guy's driving the station wagon? So he was trading on, like, there was enough juice for a national ad campaign based on his character, even 10 to 15 years later, but no appetite for him in other movies.
I'm just so perplexed by Paul Hogan, generally speaking. I don't want to talk about him or this movie anymore.
Well, I have bad news, Landon. We're going to have to talk about him at least a little bit more because I don't know. Actually, I guess we have talked for a while. Maybe we are almost done. I do just want to call out about Paul Hogan and his filmography. You know, he after the failure of Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, he returned to Australia, made a couple of indie films. One of them, Strange Bedfellows, about 2 firemen who pretend to be gay in order to get tax benefits. Then they made I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry in the United States, and Paul Hogan sued the people who made that, and that was he basically, in the 2000s, he moved back to Australia and started getting into legal battles. That was just his new thing.
Okay, all right, that's interesting.
His last film, like, it was in 2020, he released The Very Excellent Mr. Dundee. Have you heard of this movie?
Yep. I have, in passing, where he plays Paul. He doesn't play Crocodile Dundee.
Well,
is he playing a fictionalized version of himself having to deal with the fame of Crocodile Dundee?
Basically that. It's basically a series of seemingly Curb Your Enthusiasm inspired comedy vignettes with celebrity cameos, and he just seems very tired the whole time, and it's just one last movie of him sort of trading on the fame of Crocodile Dundee and everything, like, close to 40 years after the movie came out. But I mean, he just it seems just like every 10 to 15 years he goes back to that well to try and squeeze a little more. I'm mixing my metaphors.
No, it's all right. He did that. He did a Australian tourism ad again. Do you remember that whole fucking thing with Danny McBride and the Hemsworths?
Right. Yeah, they were going to do a remake.
Like, oh my god. Yeah, and it turned out to just be a tourism board ad.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense. Like, why? Like, I mean, I'm not saying I want to see a Crocodile Dundee remake, but I just don't know why you'd get all those people on board for a commercial and then not just make the movie also.
Well, it was the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, but it's a Super Bowl ad. But I mean, it's like, okay, well, now make the movie. Like, the ad had such a big response. I mean,
I think it got a little bit of backlash. Like, all of this was just for a fucking tourism ad? Go fuck yourself.
Okay, so then heal the backlash by making the movie. Maybe you could get nominated for an Academy Award.
I think at that point no one wanted the movie.
I love that Crocodile Dundee is almost this cursed object now. Everyone who goes near it, whether it's Paul Hogan or other people, winds up getting burned in some way. Any public goodwill for Crocodile Dundee was used up between 1986 and 1990.
Well, I don't have any more goodwill to talk about, but I do just real quick want to wrap up by talking about Gooding, Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yeah.
That is, because this is kind of an interesting place in his career as well. He came up through TV in the late '80s and early '90s, doing the TV shows you'd expect, Hill Street Blues, etc., etc. He has a small part in Coming to America in the 80s as Boy Getting Haircut.
Ooh, who could forget?
Yeah, but he has a huge breakthrough in 1991 with Boys in the Hood.
Yeah.
Just absolutely staggering explosion into film. Then he takes a supporting role in a stacked cast in 1992 of A Few Good Men.
Mm-hmm.
As one of the soldiers, or is it Navy? I don't remember what the.
Yeah, I think
matter.
I don't know. Gonna be honest,
I watched it recently and I still can't remember.
I haven't seen it. I'll just come out and say I have not seen that big movie I definitely should have seen.
Anyway, all in all, he has about 23-ish credits before this film, but A Few Good Men is like the biggest one right before it in '92.
Yeah, it makes sense with where he was in his career to be in this, but it also just is like, if I were a huge fan of Cuba Gooding Jr. who came to see this movie because Cuba Gooding Jr. was in it, I would be very disappointed walking out of the theater.
Yes, agreed. Although from his perspective, I can't fault him to go, okay, I've got like the drama of dramas under my belt with the Boys in the Hood. Let me, because he is such an expressive actor and has gone on to do a lot of comedies.
Yeah.
And even in his like comedic dramas like Jerry Maguire, it's a cartoon character.
Yeah, seeing his kind of exaggerated slapstick in this movie, I was reminded of his role in the classic and I believe Academy Award nominated film Rat Race. In which he, at one point...
Did Paul Hogan write the script for that?
I believe he did. I mean, it does feature John Cleese, who also shows up in the very excellent Mr. Dundee. But there is a scene in it where he goes into a bathroom to try and steal a bus driver's uniform, and he's concocted this whole story about, my wife is giving birth, and her placenta, and you need to give me your pants to put the placenta in the pants. And he's just going completely over the top in that scene. And I'm seeing, like... echoes of that. Well, I mean, that is obviously an echo of Lightning Jack, whatever. Watching him in this, I'm like, I can see the bits and pieces that he pulled on. Like, he is good at going ham. It's just the ham is higher quality when he can actually talk and say things, because he can deliver a line. Well,
Rat Race, also a movie I saw in the theater.
Oh, I saw Rat Race in theaters too. That's
okay.
I'm fairly bullish on Rat Race, a movie I haven't seen in 20 years. Maybe it's good. I don't know. We should also just the movie ends. They do the heist and they go and they get Paul Hogan's girlfriend from the brothel and they're riding off together, and the lady has gotten a newspaper about coverage of the heist, and Paul Hogan reads it, and like there's all this detail in there about like, oh, but the bank heist was masterminded by Lightning Jack, a fierce outlaw, whatever, and then the article goes on to say, and we learned this because an anonymous person wrote in and explained to us that Lightning Jack masterminded the heist, and he sent us the bank manager's pocket watch as proof that he was there. And so it's clearly that that Ben, knowing that Lightning Jack wants to be a famous outlaw, wrote to the newspaper to ensure that he would get the coverage that he wants. And Lightning Jack is so touched by this and the revelation that there is now a $10,000 bounty on his head that he shoots Ben's hat off his head and then starts dancing with him because he loves him so much. And then they all ride off together.
Now, I don't play Grand Theft Auto, but is it a thing to want to strive for, to get a higher reward on your head?
I mean, yeah, because then, like, a big part of the game is the fun of being chased around by the police. So, I mean,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is what Lightning Jack has wanted the entire time. So, in that sense, it's some sort of catharsis. The fact, though, that the only way he gets it is by the newspaper explaining in great detail how they were tipped off to what happened is...
Yeah.
Man.
The great lost thread of this movie is what's happening with the newspaper reporters and the storytelling in this film.
More Westerns about journalists. When is it going to happen? Come on. Yeah.
I wonder if Saul Rubinek was cut from this film, reprising his character from Unforgiven.
Yeah, we do just more Westerns about nerds. Let's give me an entire Western that is about the Roy Brocksmiths and the Saul Rubineks just hanging around in town being like, boy, I hope we don't get robbed today. That's going to mess up my investment strategy.
And then this film ends with a fucking song by Johnny Cash. What in the hell?
What the hell?
And the credits start to roll, and even though I sit through all credits almost all the time, I'm like, cool, movie's over.
Nope,
get
done.
out of my DVD player. Let me get you back to the library ASAP.
Landon flexing on the fact that he did not pay money to watch this.
I did not. Why was this film forgotten?
This movie was forgotten because at the time that it came out, we were done with Paul Hogan's whole deal. We were just done with it. He's doing the same thing that everybody loved in 1986 and everybody got tired of by 1989. And there is not enough. Lightning Jack is not strong enough. His performance is not strong enough to carry what is otherwise a very flimsy and formulaic Western. And yeah, it's just we weren't buying what he was selling, and we weren't remembering what he was showing us.
Yeah, I mean, you almost wrote verbatim what I wrote, which is I called him a novelty. Paul Hogan is a novelty, and the novelty had worn off, clearly.
Yes.
But also, like, if you're like me and you saw this in the theaters, why don't I remember this film? I know this film existed, but why don't I remember it? Nothing happens in this film. Literally, like, there's nothing in this film to remember because there's no story stringing fucking anything together. It's a series of moving images that even, like, Eisenstein couldn't make metaphorical through the power of editing. I mean, there's literally... This movie makes Wild Wild West look like John Wick. There's a line in this film. I can't remember exactly the scene, but it's one of those Peanuts interludes where they're talking, and Paul Hogan literally says the line, "Lightning doesn't strike twice. Once is enough." And I'm like, that could not have summed up the chances for a sequel of this film better.
Yeah.
So I'm just glad to know that this film is out of my life. I no longer, like, it. You go through, if you haven't already, you go through a period of your life where you're like, let me go watch all those films I loved or remember as a kid and see if they hold up. And you go back and watch most of them. This was one that was lingering in my head. I'm like, oh yeah, Lightning Jack exists. Should I ever watch that? And now that I have, I can look forward to the remainder of my life going, I never have to look back on Lightning Jack again.
No. You don't. He's ridden off into the sunset, and you don't want to look into the sunset because you could hurt your eyes. Yeah, no, I've been thinking about Paul Hogan a lot in the past couple days, which is not a thing anyone should be doing in 2024. So,
yeah,
let's saddle up.
let's saddle up. Should we send this back to modern memory or leave it floating out here in 1994?
Let's totally remember it. Nah, I'm just kidding. Let's forget this movie. This movie was rightfully forgotten and should stay this way.
Agreed. But I don't even think we should leave this here in 1994. I think we should actually put it in the transporter and send it back to like 1870 where it was set, so that other time traveling podcasts might happen to stumble over it.
So, but are you like, do we send it back to cowboy times and then we like bury it in an old mine shaft like the DeLorean in Back to the Future 3?
There's a whole because that opens up a plot hole in the Back to the Future series, and I don't want a plot hole in our narrative because we are,
airtight.
We're airtight.
Yes.
Literally, if we weren't airtight, we would be sucked into the vacuum of space. So
that compared to the prospect of watching another Paul Hogan movie, honestly, doesn't sound half bad.
Well, let's not piss off the machine too much, or it might throw another one at us.
That's not a fate worse than death. This is a fate worse than death.
All right, for Truman Caps, I have been Landen Solano.
And for Landen Solano, I've been Truman Caps. Have a great week, you bunch of stroppy sheelers.
See you next week, folks.
Yeah!
Movie Memory Machine is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/gruntworkpodcast to keep the machine running. Theme song by Porky's Groove Machine. Rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. For more information on today's show, visit MovieMemoryMachine.com.